directly calling the roll. You're on mute. Andy, you're muted.
I wanted to be the first person who failed to unmute myself. Great. If Lori, if you can go ahead and do the roll call, that would be great.
Yes, thank you. Dave Merritt,
Present.
Marty Whitmore,
Present.
Tom Alvey,
Here.
Kathy Chandler Henry,
Present.
Mike Richard,
Here.
Kathleen Curry,
Here.
Stan Winery,
Here.
Steve Aquafresca,
Here.
Tom Gray,
Here.
Mark Catlin,
Here.
John Ely,
Here.
Al Vandenbrink,
Here.
Doug Monger,
Here.
Rebe Hazard,
Here.
Taylor Hawes.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you do have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Now our second, well, the first item on the agenda is to review meeting agenda and objectives and any changes to the agenda. Mr. Mueller, Mr. Fleming?
Mr. President, thank you. I would request that the board add a item to the executive session agenda at new agenda item 6A Romanet 6, and then move the existing 6A 6 to 6A 7. And that new agenda item that I would recommend would be River District and statutory directives on confidentiality and conflicts of interest. And I believe Andy has some proposed changes as well. You can take those up individually or all together if you wish.
Right.
Take them up all together, yeah.
I have two additional requests for additions, Mr. President. The first being, both of them under General Manager's report. The first being the addition at item number 8K, which will be confirmation of appointment of Dave Kanzer to the Gunnison Basin Roundtable. And then item number 8L would be retention of auditor by the board for the year 2020.
Okay, are there any other items to amend for the agenda?
Staff doesn't have any additional items.
Thank you. Board, no. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the meeting agenda and objectives?
So moved. Albee.
We have a motion by Albee. Is there a second?
Second. Great.
Second by Gray. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay. The next item is a presentation and report of directors' credentials for, well, not for Garfield. We don't have any of those yet, but Gunnison, Montrose, Ouray, Rio Blanco, and Summit County, and introduction to board members. So who's going to handle that? Mr. Mueller?
Certainly. I can tell you as Secretary of the Colorado River District, we have received credentials from the following counties: from Gunnison, Montrose, Ouray, and Summit counties for our board members. We are still missing credentials from Rio Blanco and Garfield County. President Merritt, you covered your county, and we understand that appointment is still yet to be made. And with Rio Blanco County, we understand from the county that Mr. Vandenbrink has in fact been appointed, but we haven't yet seen the credentials in our hands. Luckily, Mr. Vanderbrink serves until replaced, so he will continue to serve until we get his new credentials.
Till he replaces himself?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we.
Okay. So do we have a motion to accept the credentials from Gunnison, Montrose, Ray, and Summit County?
So moved.
Motion by Chandler Henry. Is there a second?
Second by Stan.
Second by Winery. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Okay, let's have a little bit of an introduction. Start off with Gunnison County. Kathleen, I think I've met you before.
Yeah, you certainly have. Well, I'm Kathleen Curry. I live in Gunnison County. Obviously, my husband and I have a cattle and hay operation east of town. And I've worked in the water field off and on for a long time. Went to CSU for a master's degree in water resources, have a passion for irrigated agriculture. And I also work at the Capitol. I served in the legislature for 3 terms, and I still really love the legislative process. So I work for a couple of clients as a professional lobbyist, and that allows me to stay up on things, which is great. And it's a huge honor to have been appointed. We had some great applicants for this seat, and I'm just thrilled. And I know I have a big learning curve. I told Peter and Andy yesterday that I need a big map that shows me where everything is.
We have
I know this Gunnison area pretty well, but I'm excited to learn a lot more about the Big River and the main stem and the issues going on there. So really happy to be here.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome aboard. And Ms. Hawes, I think I've met you before also.
Yeah, like Kathleen, I have a long history working with many of you, and I'm based in Summit County in Silverthorne. I'm a water attorney by training, water quality and quantity. I've worked for Northwest Colorado Council of Governments, so I've worked for many of the counties here represented, so it's nice to kind of get back to my county roots. And I've also worked for the River District for Peter as associate counsel years ago. And in the last 12 or so, almost 13 years, I've been working at the Nature Conservancy running our Colorado River program. So I've gotten that chance, Kathleen, to kind of learn those big river issues. But I will say reading the packet the last couple of days is a lot of stuff I haven't been working on and I have to get reacquainted with. So it'll be a learning process for me as well, and looking forward to working with all of you. And it's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you again. Welcome to the River District Board. Only regret that I won't have a chance to work with you two after today, but you'll see me around still. I guess our directors from Montrose to Ray, Rio Blanco counties need no further introduction. They are returning and glad to have them back. So we move on to our first substantive item of the agenda is the election of board officers for 2021. Since I am going off, I do get to at least run this election, which is it's gratifying. So our first one will be for the election of president. And do we have a nomination for president for the next year?
Mr. Chairman, I have a nomination. This is Aqua Fresca in Mesa County, and it's my privilege to nominate the distinguished director from Ouray County, Director Marty Whitmore, for the office of president.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Hazard, second.
Second by Alvey. Are there any further nominations? Hearing none, I would accept a motion for the nomination to be closed and for Ms. Whitmore to be elected by acclamation.
Second by Winery.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Catlin. Okay, we have a motion and a second for the election of Ms. Whitmore to be president of Colorado River Water Conservation District Board. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
Nay? Okay, congratulations, Ms. Whitmore.
Thank you.
I will go through the election for vice president and turn the gavel over to you. Now election of vice president. Do we have a nomination for vice president?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Kathy Chandler Henry. This is Monger.
Thank
Second,
you.
Richard.
And we have a motion and a second. Are there any further nominations? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to close the nominations and to elect Kathy Chandler Henry by acclamation.
Ms. Monger, so moved.
Okay,
Second.
we have a motion by Munger, a second by Hazard. So we have a motion to elect Kathy Chandler Henry as the River District Vice President for the next year. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, we have essentially a historic moment where we have two women who have been elected to lead the River District into our next generation, really, with the partnership that was passed in November. We have a brand new thrust for the River District. I'm sorry that I won't be with you to see that go forward, but I'm also very thrilled that I'll be able to watch by the stands and observe as things go forward. And thank you, everybody. I'll be with you for the next day and a half, but I'll be back in the cheap seats. So thank
Thanks,
you, Ms.
Dave.
Whitmore. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Dave. Appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for the vote of confidence. Really appreciate it. And congratulations, Kathy. This is going to be fun.
Thank you.
And so, next order of business is adoption of resolutions for outgoing directors. They were in your packet.
Oh, hi, Christina. How are you?
Okay, so adoption of resolutions for outgoing directors, they were in your packet.
Hey,
Is there a motion to adopt one or all of them?
Don't mind, thanks. Hey, Tracy?
Catlin,
I'll make a
motion to adopt all of them,
all
all
right.
the resolutions for the outgoing directors, Vandenbrink.
Thank you. Thank you,
Second,
Director
Catlin.
Vandenbrink. Second by Director Catlin. Thank you very much. I know these Zoom meetings are kind of challenging. It would be helpful, I think, during voting if everybody could be seen to the extent you can. Okay, so we have a motion and a second for adoption of resolutions of outgoing directors. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed, nay. All right, we're going to thank all of our outgoing directors. And we appreciate your services. Dave, you're not exactly outgoing at this point for a little bit. And we miss Karn. And so we appreciate the efforts. And I'm hoping that by this summer, it looks like maybe even by April, but certainly by July, we will hopefully have our opportunity to do our picnic and have our outgoing directors join us so we can thank them again. Okay, next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there anything that anyone would like to pull from the consent agenda for individual discussion? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Madam Chairman, I'm sorry, I have an addition
Okay,
to the meeting minutes of December 3rd. This would be on page 28 of your electronic packet.
okay,
And on page 28, under General Manager's Report, in the second paragraph, it reads, board input included delegating approval authority to the General Manager for projects involving district funding with an annual, we need to add, limit.
oh, good catch, good catch.
And I have a second addition. the following sentence that reads, other suggestions ranged from, including, and then it reads several suggestions. There's one suggestion that was made that did not get on here, and that was a suggestion to consider setting up a longer term account that the board could decide to add dollars to on an annual basis to build up a larger sum of investment dollars for larger projects. And unless I'm missing that in here, that did not get included in the minutes.
Does anyone have a different memory or have a problem with those two additions? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the minutes as amended.
So move, Merritt.
Is there a second?
Second, Aquafresca.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. All right, consent agenda is approved. We will now move into the general counsel's report. Peter, do you want to talk about executive session?
Thank you, Madam President. It's very good to be able to say that. And congratulations to both you and Madam Vice President. I would make a recommendation now that the board convene into executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-402 paren 4B and E to discuss the items listed on the agenda under tab 6A.
Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So moved, Winery.
Thank you, Winery.
Second, Chandler Henry.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. We go into executive session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. All right, and Peter, does this session need to continue to be recorded?
For the record, the substance of the communications in this attorney-client communication, or in this executive session, will constitute attorney-client communications for which no further recording needs to be made. Let's see, I'm waiting for a few folks.
Executive session.
Okay, let's give us our staff a minute to get everybody in from the waiting room. We are back on the record at this point, but if we can make sure that we give the public an opportunity to come in. Take a look at that. It looks like everybody is back in. If you want to, President Whitmore, announce that we're out.
Yes, everyone, we are out of executive session. I'll ask Peter to summarize and then do his report.
Thank you, President Whitmore. During the executive session portion of the River District's meeting today, the River District discussed with council and staff and received and provided guidance to council and staff on items listed under agenda 6A. Note for the record that Director Merritt was not present for the discussion on item 6A Romanet 1. I do not believe there was any formal action proposed or recommended to be taken in public session following the executive session discussion. So I don't have anything on that. There are two items for which we are seeking public action and I would ask Jason to, if he's available, to take up both of those items. The first is the proposed financial governance policy or amendments to the existing financial governance policy.
Thanks, Peter. The this is covered in your board materials, starting actually on page 1 of the general report and going into page 2. And we have a little bit of a chicken and egg type situation here in that last at your special meeting in December, when we were discussing our new partnership program, there was conversation about authorizing the general manager to approve projects under a certain cap. That got us to thinking, and we raised the issue of the fact that currently under the financial governance policy, the general manager can approve contractual arrangements and furtherance of the River District's policies, provided that you have budgeted and appropriated those funds for up to $25,000. We were thinking that it would make some sense that that also correlate with the authority that you provide him under the partnership program. I think the current recommendation is $50,000. We would recommend that you amend your financial governance policy to be consistent with that. And that would be an amendment to section 3A and 3C of the financial governance policy. You'll see on page 2 of your general report what we would propose that amendment to look like.
Okay.
If I can, President Mark Whitmore,
Sure.
I want to just say for the, to the board, please, you need to do what you feel appropriate from a fiscal perspective. Don't worry about how that may sound to me. If you decide to keep that at 25,000, I'm fine either way. It's your authority to delegate, and I appreciate whatever decision you make on that.
Thank you. All right, directors, what is your pleasure on that item? Is there discussion or a motion to get it teed up?
Staff recommendation to increase the authority for the general manager.
Motion by Director Alvey.
I'll second that by Merritt.
Second by Director Merritt. Is there any discussion on the motion? I'm not seeing any raised hands. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. That motion passes.
Thank you. The next issue in the general report is special counsel rates. Pursuant to your litigation policy, the board considers and approves our special counsel as well as their rates. Anytime that we have an increase in those rates, we bring that back to the board for approval. We have had, in fact, Graham Gilbert, who is our special counsel in Utah, who has been handling the water horse resources issues for us. That is the only attorney in our list of special counsel that has indicated that they will have a rate increase this year. It's an increase of $12 per hour to $312 per hour. As noted in the memo, to date, Mr. Gilbert's fees have been split equally between the River District and the Upper Yampa District. Considering the expertise of our special counsel and the current legal market, we believe that that increase is reasonable, and we would therefore recommend that the board approve the 2021 rates for the River District special counsel.
Okay. You've heard staff recommendation. Are there questions for Jason about that recommendation or about the special counsel's rates?
This is Monger. I move that we approve staff's recommendation.
Motion by Monger.
Merritt, second.
Merritt seconds. Is there any further discussion on the motion? I'm not seeing raised hands. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. That motion passes. I'm just going to say, Peter, the next thing on the agenda is discussion of the goals and objectives for everyone. Hopefully you've all had a chance to review those carefully in the packet that was sent out. I think rather than using our time to have Peter go through those each individually, it might be more productive to simply ask for questions or comments from everyone on those stated goals and objectives. As you know, Peter's goals and objectives are also largely driven by what needs to be done today. Other duties is assigned and directed by the board. So questions, comments, concerns, anything that anybody would like to discuss in his written goals and objectives. Peter, I'm not seeing anyone that that has a concern or question on those. So perhaps we can move on to whatever else you have in your report.
Thank you, President Whitmore. The only thing I would say on those goals and objectives is one of the things that's been added, and you're going to hear a lot more about this from Andy, of course, is the legal team's efforts to help the River District implement its partnership funding program. We anticipate that as good as that program is going to be and as much benefit as that's going to help the River District and its constituents with, it's going to be a lot of work. And we're going to be part of that and helping out the River District on that. That's something I added there that you may not have seen before. The only other item is questions the board may have on other matters in the General Counsel Public Report. I would point out there's a fair amount of good news in there in the completion of certain things or resolution of some legal cases that have been going on. I also would call your attention to the discussion on the anti-speculation work group and the attachment that to the public report that is a draft. I should make sure to be clear about, from the legal work group of the anti-speculation task force that was called for by Senate Bill 4820 last year. And in particular, paragraph 2D, I think it was, on that report, which in my view, and I don't mean to put words in Representative Catlin's mouth or other sponsors of that bill, co-sponsors of that bill, that might be one of the key parts of interest, which was the fact that there is the potential for the occurrence of speculation in water rights now in a way that escapes the public's purview and the opportunity for the water court to conduct a review that currently exists for things like the appropriation of a water right, a diligence of a conditional water right, or a change of a water right. All those things go before the public in the water court, where the acquisition of water rights for the theoretical profit in the future by the non-use of that water, in theory, could escape the public's purview and review by the water court. And that is something that I thought was important to draw attention to, both in this legal report and to the legislators that requested the analysis for under the anti-speculation task force.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Any questions, comments on that for Peter? Director Aquafresca.
Peter, is the task force going to recommend that that topic be addressed by the legislature?
That's premature. The task force has not moved on to recommendations at this point, and that would be an issue for the entire task force, not just its legal subcommittee. So I frankly just don't know how the task force is going to address that potential loophole, if you will.
But would I be correct to assume that that's the one legal item that your subcommittee has identified for further discussion, analysis?
It's certainly one of the key legal items that I will be identifying for further discussion and analysis.
Good. Well, I think that's a good thing. Thank you. Thanks.
And I would point out that, it's not an easy topic. There are some nuances and and concerns about, obviously you need to protect the value of folks' property interests, and we have that firmly in mind as well. But I do believe this was, in my probably admittedly biased view, one of the key issues that might have been of concern that was the genesis of Senate Bill 48 last year. So I don't have anything further. If there are other questions about anything else in the General Counsel report, happy to discuss those.
Anyone else have question, comment, discussion for Peter?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Director Catlin.
thank you. Peter, thank you for bringing that up. Those are some of the things that I've been worried about as we've gone along. That one shadow in the law is something that has concerned me, all along with this. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to address that in legislation. When I sell my place to somebody, I never think about what they're going to be doing with it. But we're seeing that there is a new nuance, so to speak. And how are we going to deal with that as communities as we go forward? So, I think without getting into a big discussion, it's just thank you for identifying that. That is something that I'll be very aware of. And thank you and that group. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm not seeing hands raised. So I'm thinking that's the end of the discussion right at the present. Thank you very much, Peter. Excellent report as always. So I think we're ready for lunch. Let's break for lunch and be back and start with the general manager's report at, can we just say 12:30 to make it easy? And we'll see everybody back at 12:30.
Thank you.
Important things to discuss. So Andy, if you'd like to take the floor and start through the general manager's report, please.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Madam President, and welcome to the position. And look forward to working with you and with Director Chandler Henry. I want to start under item 8A in the agenda, Drought Contingency Planning and Demand Management Update. As you can see, I just want to summarize a couple things. The UCRC is moving slowly forward with their study of demand management. They've hired a significant number, or contractor team, I should say, to perform a number of tasks. We reviewed that scope of work back when it was issued. For the most part, we think it's a good scope of work. And we look forward to reading and reviewing their work product as it becomes available. They're really just getting started on that as of this early winter, late fall. So nothing to report in terms of substantive progress from them. The CWCB, I think you can see in my memo, they really are in their phase 2 of their work plan, where they're trying to decide whether or not, or to produce additional information for their board to determine if demand management is achievable, advisable, and worthwhile. And those are some loaded questions, I think. Frankly, I'm glad to see them looking at those issues. I think the advisability question is one that this board is focused on tremendously, along with your staff. We're happy to assist the CWCB in any way as they move forward. I think it's a good thing that they're looking at that. They're really looking at what the costs and benefits are of that type of program, and they are very in tune with the idea that such a program, if not designed correctly, could really cause significant damage to our communities. And you'll note Commissioner and Upper Colorado River Commissioner Mitchell, and in her other role as CWCB director, executive director did provide an op-ed recently in response to some articles we'll talk about in a minute, where she very specifically called out the need to make sure that we take a multi-pronged approach to the challenges we're facing so that we can preserve our communities throughout Colorado and the values we hold dear. Very happy to hear Commissioner Mitchell saying that, and looking forward to working with her and the staff and her board on those issues. So I think that's headed in the right direction from my perspective. At the Colorado River District level, we've been involved in ongoing discussions at staff level and with the state and the Front Range, but we're also have kicked off our stakeholder process. And just to refresh everybody's memory, that's approximately a 21-member group of water users from the irrigation, recreation, environmental, industrial, and domestic water supply arena. We did our best to try to find folks who are not and have not been actively engaged in some of these policy discussions. The goal with that is to walk folks through, well, and let me say the geographic dispersion, particularly of the agricultural folks, is very significant. We have someone from the upper Yampa, and someone from the lower Yampa, someone from the White, someone from the upper Colorado and lower Colorado, someone from the upper Uncompahgre and the North Fork, as well as the Gunnison. We're really trying, upper Gunnison, I mean, we're really trying to make sure that we get a broad representation of folks who can provide input on what their interests are that they'd like to make sure are protected. And then more importantly, where we're headed with this is a list of recommendations that if the state or and the UCRC move forward with setting up some form of demand management program, that we have something that our water users have said, look, you know, if you're going to set this up, these are the rules and regulations at a bare minimum that we would need in the structure of the market. We've been very clear in that process and in our other statements that this board has not endorsed the concept of demand management, nor has it come out against it, that you've directed us to be involved in the discussions of it. I think, you know, there are lots of concerns that have been raised about it. I would tell you we've only had 2 out of probably 10 meetings that we intend to have with that stakeholder group. And I think we will get some really great information, some good guidance from this that will bring back to this board. And then once this board's been able to look at it, bring it back to the CWCB in a report format. You know, there are, I will just say, we spent a lot of time last week with that group talking about what their interests are. And I will tell you, there are lots of concerns. No one here should be surprised by that. And so how you address those concerns or whether those concerns are so serious that they represent a fatal flaw in such a program has yet to be pronounced or decided upon by that group, but we are trying to operate that group in a consensus-based fashion. You know, I'm very impressed with the volunteer work that the stakeholders are putting into it. I really appreciate all their efforts. Those meetings are being held every 3 weeks on Monday mornings. They are open to the public, but the public is not, we don't have a public participation section of that meeting. They're not a governing board of any governmental entity. They're merely a stakeholder group. So the public is welcome to observe. We do ask that, and have reached out to public as they've registered for that meeting, to confirm that members of the public are willing to abide by the non-attribution rules that we have at that group, so that we can get the free-ranging discussion that we've seen without fear of being quoted, whether it's in the newspaper or somebody's email list attacking them for their statements. So we're really trying to create an atmosphere by which or in which people can really explore these options and talk about the best ways to protect their communities and their operations. Are there any questions about the UCRC, the state, or our district? And then I'll move on to some of the press that we've seen. But are there any questions at this point?
Yep.
Yes, I have a question. Andy, is the UCRC and or the state of Colorado including a discussion of the recent phenomena of Wall Street investors purchasing irrigated farms with senior water rights into their scope of work?
I don't know if it's wrapped into their scope of work. I know that both the state is very specifically looking at those issues. And I believe the UCRC will as well. I can reach out to Amy Haas and talk to her more about that, Director Aquafresca. But certainly the state has expressed great concern about that, and I think they will be looking at those issues.
And the River District's work group?
Oh yeah, very specifically looking at that issue, and we addressed that, and we had 2 different work breakout sessions last time, and that was heavily focused on in those discussions, and will continue to be.
Thank you.
Other
Mr. Alvey?
questions? Yes, Director Alvey.
Just, you may not have any greater insight than any of us on this, but what's the CWCB anticipating the schedule to be for the rollout of their so-called straw man demand management plan?
That's unclear to me at this point, Director Alvey, but as soon as we hear anything, we'll let you all know. So. Okay.
Anyone else have a question on this for Andy?
So I want to then move on. Thank you, Madam President. I want to move on then to the recent press articles that you may have seen quite a bit of discussion in my memo on. The first was the New York Times piece, Wall Street Eyes Billions in the Colorado River, Colorado's Water. And the second was that op-ed piece that appeared in the Denver Post 2 days later. I think first and foremost, I want to say that those articles, their timing, the subject matter was not accidental. That is a media strategy clearly being utilized by Water Asset Management and their representatives, I believe primarily put together by our former Colorado River Commissioner, James Eklund, who is now their attorney. It is an effort to discuss the virtue of free markets in the water markets in Western United States, and specifically in the Colorado River, literally utilizing judgmental terms as wrong types of use of water that would apply to most of you who are irrigating crops or whose families do or have done irrigation on crops. That would be, according to the author of that article, a wrong use of the water, and that it has a judgment that the urban use in that article should be moved as a much more beneficial use to society and a better place for it. It's a really, frankly, divisive article and raises questions that I think this board has been grappling with for quite some time. We've discussed the presence of WAM and potential other hedge funds or other investment vehicles in our district, as well as in the West. Frankly, the article is a great, from my perspective, performs a great service for all of us in that it raises the level of awareness of what the ultimate goals are. Some of the statements in there, which I quoted in my report, about Mr. Eklund's view that, this program that he helped establish when he was working for our state is a market that would be best, that the better allocation of water will occur through an unregulated or free market where individual investment companies and others have the ability to have their own storage accounts in Lake Powell. I want to refresh everybody's memory that today, under the Demand Management and Storage Agreement, which was signed by the 4 Upper Basin states and incorporated into the full Drought Contingency Plan, in addition to the legislation, specifically said that the storage account that was being created in Lake Powell and the other crisp reservoirs was solely for the purpose to be used by the Upper Colorado River Commission for the purposes of compact compliance. There's no room in protecting the Upper Basin from compact compliance. In my opinion, there's no room for individual pools held by individual investment companies or utilities. And if I can explain the fundamental difference in that, the UCRC controlled pool is designed to be proactive and to prevent a compact curtailment from ever occurring. So essentially, as a second line of defense after moving water from Flaming Gorge and other upper crisp reservoirs into Powell, if there's still additional water needed to make sure that we remain in compliance with our compact obligations, this pool, which is unequalized and not subject to the tiering regulations under the 07 guidelines, would then be utilized to make sure that to the extent possible that we don't violate our non-depletion obligations under the compact. That's obligation that is held by the entire Upper Basin, not by one state, not by one utility, not by one investment company. So it's a collective obligation of the 4 upper division states. Since that, and even before that demand management storage agreement was signed by our state, there was discussion. If you remember, we talked about this back in September of 2018. There was discussion about individual, and it was clear in our state's November 2018 policy statement from the CWCB that that pool was to be used for compact compliance. Again, preventing the compact from ever from a call from ever occurring. What an individual pool would do is it would allow potentially an individual utility who might pay an individual investment company that has that storage account or pool, might pay them money to use that water as an exchange, a source of exchange or augmentation water, which would then allow the junior utility to continue to divert water while the rest of our state is subject to compact curtailment. It has been the position of this board that's not an acceptable use of Lake Powell. That's not an acceptable use of that storage account. It is clear from that article that WAM, through our former Colorado River Commissioner, James Eklund, is lobbying to change that at the federal level. And we've heard that. We've made it very clear with our delegation that that's not something that's acceptable. Our delegation to date has agreed with us and other water users in the state that that's not an acceptable situation. I've had conversations with front range water providers and some of their attorneys on this subject. They agree that that is not where they want to head. They view the imposition of private capital into a water market as speculation. They view it as we do. They view it as something that will just jack the costs of water up for private profit. As I go through in our in that memo, and I know many of you, all of you are very well aware of this, that water in the state of Colorado is owned by the public, subject to the right of appropriation for a beneficial use. It is not out there and available for speculation or private profit seeking. And that doesn't mean that we completely get along with our front range utility brethren. We're not very excited about some of their plans to buy and dry agriculture, whether it's over here or on the front range, as we've seen recently. But nonetheless, the imposition of this private capital and the creation of a market that would allow them to get the kind of returns that Wall Street wants to see is something that our state with this public resource needs to make sure never happens. And so I would just say I take a fairly strong view of that. I would love to hear your comments. Before I do want to just focus on the second article, which is the op-ed piece that was titled "Western Slope Needs to Suspend Irrigation to Avert Water Shortage Catastrophe." right? So in all fairness, the Denver Post came up with that title. The author of that was Brian Richter. Brian Richter, frankly, I'm going to say it really bluntly, misrepresented who he is through a failure to disclose his financial ties with Water Asset Management and 2 other investment funds that are focused on buying up and transferring water from Western Slope irrigation from Colorado River irrigated land in the upper and lower basin. Mr. Richter completely misrepresented himself. He represented himself as a former TNC head of global water, which he was, but he also represented himself as a professor at the University of Virginia. It appears that he is an instructor of 1 class, maybe 2, at the University of Virginia. He has a financial interest, a personal interest in several funds where he is listed as the co-founder with the sole stated and purpose of drying up agricultural land in Western Colorado. He paints that as an environmental pursuit, something that wants to save the river. We believe, and I think many of our NGO allies and other state and federal officials believe that that's not an appropriate vehicle. We don't think that that's going to end up preserving the quality of our communities and our population here on the West Slope. So it's unfortunate that those kind of misrepresentations were not caught by the Denver Post. I would remind everybody here who's listening that the Denver Post too is owned by a New York-based investment company. They failed to bother to do any kind of research into Mr. Richter and his background. It really wasn't difficult. We have the documents off the internet. It took about 15 minutes to pull all that and keep it in our files. It's really disturbing to see that kind of effort. And for those of you who aren't familiar, placing an op-ed in the Denver Post in a strategic manner takes quite a bit of effort, quite a bit of political pull with the editorial department at the Denver Post. It wasn't something that was done by someone without connections. It was something that was done by somebody with a pedigree probably very similar to James Eklund's. So this is a concerted push, and I think it's a push to try to put pressure on our state and the UCRC to move forward with demand management quickly without safeguards for our local economies and our local users. And I think we need to call it out as we are doing right now. And I will tell you, I'm working on a joint statement with some of our Front Range and West Slope water providers, and that should be coming out shortly. I note that our new director, Taylor Hawes, has responded in her role at the Nature Conservancy on the Colorado River program yesterday or 2 days ago in the Grand Junction Sentinel and other papers in a joint editorial with the Family Farm Alliance, I believe, and really commend that. I think we included it within our news drop. If we haven't done it today, we will do it shortly. So I wanted to let everybody know that dialogue's out there. And I would love to, if anybody thinks that I'm headed the wrong direction, I welcome that, welcome hearing that. If you think it's appropriate for staff to put a letter together for President Whitmore to sign, to send to the governor and Commissioner Mitchell to reiterate what our position is and our interests are, Peter and I and other staff would be happy to put that together and make sure we get that out. But I do want to just point out that this is, it's created quite a stir, throughout the Intermountain West and frankly in New York. Unfortunately, myself and several other of our staff members have friends who work in the investment field and Wall Street, and many of them have called us to find out just how quickly they can get inside information to help themselves make millions or billions of dollars. So it isn't just us who noticed that article. So.
All right, I do want to open this up for discussion. I would just note that this board had some very strong words at the time that James Eklund was pushing so hard on getting demand management pushed forward, both through the agreement related to the Upper Colorado River Commission, but also in his capacity in DNR and in pushing the CWCB towards fast tracking demand management. And so we have long been vocal about our concerns about demand management. And I guess if anything, at least this clearly demonstrates that we were not simply being paranoid or unreasonable in our concerns. So with that, Director Aquafresca, I see your hand first. Would you like to go first, please?
Thank you. Well, Andy, I do believe you are certainly going in the right direction on this. Myself as one director and my constituents would give you our wholehearted support on that. I believe your suggestion to draft a letter from this board to the governor and to Rebecca Mitchell, and I would include the director of the Department of Natural Resources of Colorado on that list as well. With that said, I want to ask, does the River District have a good firm statement in our written policy statements to back up our position on this? And I know we'll be revisiting some of those policies tomorrow.
You know, Director Aquafresca, that's a great question. And I would say that today, I'm not sure that any one of our policies in particular focuses on this issue. But if you'll direct us to, I believe that our staff can come back and at our next meeting with a recommendation for a policy that specifically addresses this or hones up existing policies that touch on it.
By next meeting, do you mean tomorrow or April?
I mean, perhaps one of our bi-weekly legislative meetings. So not by tomorrow, unfortunately, but
okay.
Certainly
all right. Thank you.
Within the next month.
Director Aquafresca, that was a really good point. And I think unless I see somebody disagreeing wildly, I think that we should direct staff to make sure we have a very strong policy statement. However, Peter, do you have a thought on that?
Sure, I certainly don't disagree at all. I would just point out that I believe, and no qualms with the suggestion to develop a specific policy, but that by looking at existing policies that you do have, that is very clear that the direction and that we have taken and that you have expressed confidence in is wholeheartedly consistent with those existing policies. You might have to look at 1, 2, 3, or 4 of them to ferret out this exact issue. But my personal belief is it's existing in those policies.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that, but it would probably be good to have a very direct and succinct policy to this topic in our written policies.
Agreed. Director Catlin, it looked like you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I was in that article, and just before they printed it, they called me and said, well, we're going to cut 1,000 words out of it and they're yours. I took some time with the guy and we had a pretty good conversations. He understood what I was trying to say, but what ended up getting out was it appeared like I was all in favor of selling our farms and sending the water down the river. That is not what I told him. I've used the comment that these farms or these guys is 401k, and I didn't want to get in between them and their retirement. And I still believe that. But the way that article was written, it made them look like they were the knights in shining armor, that they were going to help our neighbors. They were going to help the cities. They were going to do all of this. And to me, it seemed like it was just a business advertisement. People are wanting to get into the water market. They want to get in to make water a commodity. Well, I can tell you, there's been a lot of people lose a lot of money in the commodity. And it made it look like the world's largest casino was deciding they were going to move to town, buy up our farms, dry up our towns, and take our kids' future. I, for one, will not stand by and let that happen. I still care about the people that own these farms. But I can tell you that none of these guys that are selling their farms are thinking about whether or not they're going to sell the water with them, or that the new guys or the new investment hedge fund managers are talking about us moving the water, because I think most of them would slow down and would try to find a way to do something different than that. I honestly believe that. And what was spoke about earlier this morning in regards to what are we going to do about how are we going to deal with some of these things, I'm beginning to wonder if there might need to be a change in regards to who the injured parties are when these change of uses come through. The communities that have based their total past and their complete future on the ability to be an agricultural community with water, with crops, with renewable crops that come in every year. To buy and dry, lease and cease, these kind of things seems to me to go against what we've always thought Western Colorado was. And you know, they put a nice picture in the paper. If the subject is nice, it looks nice. I wasn't too proud of the picture, but you know, I just want you to know that that was that's the first time I put my foot in the pool, so to speak. And it'll be a long time before I do that again. Because, you know, cats that type their news stories out can make me look or sound any way they want me to look or sound.
It's true.
From now on, they're going to have to hear me say it in public. I'm not going to sit and have a cup of coffee with somebody that at the end of the deal, somebody decides that he can change what I said. I can't prove it, but I can damn sure bet you that the next time they see me, they'll know what I meant. But you know, I just want everybody to know that the River District is out there in front. None of us on this board are saying, yeah, come on, let's get with this. And the idea that that pool down in Lake Powell has private names written on it is absolutely ridiculous. We talked to all of our elected officials at the time we were negotiating that pool within a pool. That pool was for the state of Colorado, for all of us, not for somebody who's got enough money to do whatever they think they want to do. And if that's the case, let's get rid of that pool. Because I'm not in favor of you and me financing these guys so that they get rich, we go broke, and our kids have no future. We've got enough trouble here on the Western Slope as it is. But anyway, I could get carried away and get up on my apple box, but Aqua Fresca told me I had to get off the apple box, and so did Albie. So anyway, I want you to know that's where I'm at, and I will be much more vocal with these folks. That was a dirty trick. That was a dirty trick to the people I represent. It was a dirty trick to you. It was a dirty trick to everybody on the Western Slope. It won't go unforgotten. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you,
and
Director
Mark,
Catlin.
yeah, if I can just respond for a moment, President Whitmore, I do want to, I share your sentiment. As you might imagine, I spent a lot of time talking with that reporter about the importance of preserving the communities and the people on the Western Slope that depend upon irrigated agriculture. You'll note that none of that discussion made it into that article. So it was a very, very one-sided piece.
Director Gray, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Director Catlin, but also to add to that about this individual pools in there. We on the Western Slope need to get together because we can't be hypocritical and say they can't do it. But we have voices, both East and West Slope, saying, oh, we want to be able to put water in a pool for ourselves. And so I think we need to make sure that we have a consistent message that we can't just apply to an asset management company, but we want to apply it to ourselves. So just want to put that out there.
Okay, thank you. Director Curry.
Thank you. I was just going to throw in that that the ag economics drive the decision-making process for a lot of producers, at least the folks that aren't owned by wealthy Texans. The ranches that were up where I live, a lot of them are owned baseball team owners. But the folks that are really weighing the economics and feeling like their future is fairly bleak are vulnerable, obviously, to market pressure. And I think the river district's work to help with infrastructure and to help reduce the uncertainty that irrigators face goes a long way towards motivating producers to stay in business. And even though that's not the topic right now, the work we're going to do with the 7A funds, I just want to commend the River District for engaging on that front, because any steps we can take to improve the economic viability for these producers will help them weather this. And with climate change and the ongoing drought, the future is really tough when cattle prices are not going up. And when hay prices, they're okay, but your input costs are going up. And I just wanted to mention that, Madam Chair, that I think that the work we're doing on those other fronts will help producers stay in business and navigate these pressures.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to speak to this? Yes, Director Chandler Henry.
Yeah, thank you. I just wonder, Andy, if you could outline a little more what the River District's response to this will be. I think it would be extremely valuable to get an article in every single newspaper in the district, and maybe an op-ed column that could have the local director's name on it, as well as yours and Marty's as president, just to show, the residents of our district entrusted us with a lot with their vote on 7A. A lot of them have seen this article, and I just wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what our public response will be.
Sure, I appreciate that, Director Chandler Henry. I think that our response should be fairly multi-pronged, and I think number one, that stressing the nature of a water right in the state of Colorado, helping people understand what water is present and what it's used for and owned for, what a beneficial use is, how that doesn't apply to speculation. But I think that being proactive in talking about things, I think hitting the items that Director Curry just mentioned, that the way we stay and help our communities stay in business and keep the doors open is by improving our operational efficiencies and helping people adjust. I think we have to recognize at the same time that we have a diminished and diminishing flow in the Colorado River and its tributaries, and that we're seeing the effects of climate change firsthand. And as such, we are going to have to innovate on the Western Slope in order to sustain our communities. And that does mean consuming less water potentially in our future. It means operating our systems as efficiently as we can. It means balancing all of our economic interests, which include not just irrigated ag, but the health of the river for our recreational economy and our tourism economy. And it means that we have to all work together, as we did with 7A, frankly, as a perfect example of those interests coming together and trying to find commonalities. I think there's lots we can do to, if you will, do more with less in the system, as long as the players in that system are interested in the benefit to all of our communities, right? And so bringing those stakeholders together, as we have done historically and as we did for 7A, is how we create a future where our communities continue to thrive, our agricultural industry continues to thrive, our recreation and tourism industries thrive. But we have to acknowledge, and I think and tell the truth to our communities that it's going to require all of us working together and adapting to the future in order to make it work. We can't just continue to do the same things that were done 100 years ago and expect to survive and thrive with less water. So that's what I would suggest, Director Chandler Henry.
Who else would like to speak to this? I'm not seeing anybody else jump up. I think, Andy, I think though you also saw the emails from everyone. I think there was strong interest from pretty much everybody on the board to make sure that there is a very clear response. I think Director Chandler Henry summed it up nicely with her suggestions about how we also get this word out to our own constituents, as well as to try and provide a message that can have a broader audience as well.
Great. And we'll work on that, and we'll continue to help get that word out. Our external affairs team is already working on that as we speak. Mr. Monger, it looks like you might have something.
I was just going to say, Director Monger.
Yeah, just real quickly, so I know the Upper Yampa is interested in having some type of a response to those things, because we know that our people are seeing those things. And so if we could team up with the River District, we would be interested in teaming up with that as the Conservancy District as well.
Okay, thank you.
I had also suggested that honestly, if we could put together a statement that the Southwestern District agreed with, it would be perhaps really beneficial to be able to say, listen, it's, we're all unified. We represent different interests, we've all got different kinds of things that we use water for on the West Slope, but the one thing we're really, really in unity on is we don't want this to become, the New York hedge fund new thing.
Well, and I think this is a good opportunity, and I think the state has already recognized this as a wake-up call. The discussion about a demand management market needs to focus on the rules, the regulations, the structure that can protect our communities. And if it can't be done, the program should go away.
Right.
And I think I'm hearing that now from others at the state, and so I do think articles like this actually will help us make our case. I mean, this district, this board has been saying this in this conversation for as long as I've been here and long before. And I think we finally have been given, I think others have been given a wake-up call as to why our district has been calling for that. So we'll work all of that into our responses. Southwest, if I failed to mention, Southwestern is likely to sign off on the joint op-ed piece that myself, Denver Water, Northern, and Southwestern are putting together. And there may be others on the Front Range as well who are willing to take a position on these very important issues.
All righty. Anything else anybody wants to say on this topic? Yes, Director Merritt.
Yes. Yeah, this is just one more in a long line of investors trying to make big money off of Western Water. We saw it with the Galloway proposal, with the Resource Conservation Group, with the son of Galloway. For the last 30 or 40 years, they've been trying to make money off of only a temporary impact. It's not gonna be permanent, just a temporary. And it's just one more instance, and and then it goes back, the turn of the century. There's a lot of Eastern money that broke their pick on trying to make big money in the West. And this will go that way too, I believe.
Well, Director Merritt, you raise a great point. I do want to mention that one of the principals in WAM, Disc Dean, is also a participant in the Vidler Tunnel Company, which you might remember from the
yes.
He was accompanied, if I'm not mistaken, by a gentleman by the name of Walraven Kettlapper.
Yep.
And Mr. Kettlapper's son works for WAM in the Grand Valley. So the apples are not falling far from the tree, and actually they're pretty much the same tree here. So our district has dealt with this threat before, and it's just coming up in a different format.
Okay, anything else on this topic before Andy moves on to, I think, DK's rather grim hydrology report?
Looks like Director Vandenbrink has something to say, although
Oh, sorry.
he's muted at the moment, so we can't hear him, but.
Yeah. Unmute. There you go. Thank you.
I think I'm there now. Thank you. And I might be missing a piece here, but you know, this whole piece of, I know this discussion about demand management and these articles going on here. You know, I just want to point out as well that the White River Basin, that's primarily Rio Blanco County, is scared to death of any demand management program or them telling us to idle agriculture or whatever that might be to participate. For the simple fact is that's how we've maintained our water in our river system for over 140 years. And we all basins don't seem to be created equally yet. There's some that are more junior than others that are still building up and trying to conserve more water. And in all honesty, being a water guy and running lots of utilities that I have over the years, it takes water to save water. And I think that's a piece that's missing from a lot. You got to have water, a bank somewhere, whether it's in a reservoir or in a point of diversion or groundwater, for you to be able to back up on and to be able to save water throughout your distribution system. It's just not made available. So just something that I just wanted to make sure was shared with this and this message that carries forward, that there's a piece that's not necessarily there. You have areas that want to conserve water and maybe improve efficiencies, but yet they can't participate with this whole thing because they know that that's going to be their Achilles heel if they start participating more in a demand management program and doing what these WAM or these other institutions are talking about. So I'll end with that. Thank you.
Okay, and it looks like we've got one final question or comment from Director Aquafresca. You're muted, Steve.
Thank you. Just a late thought. Is anybody getting with our CWCB main stem representative to help her understand the gravity of these issues? And you know, I'd help with that any way I can, but that probably needs to be done.
Director Aquafresca, that's a good idea. I will take that chore on myself, along with Zane Kessler. We've had discussions along these lines with our main stem representative in the past, and not always been successful in getting agreement on the value of irrigated agriculture. So,
and I might just suggest that when you develop the letter or whatever response, that maybe it needs to also go to each one of our CWCB reps, because I think they could all, they may or may not have seen those articles, but I think they'd all benefit from seeing the response.
Okay, agreed.
Okay, next on the agenda.
All right, next on the agenda, we'll try to get moving here. Well, actually, let's let DK, this is a worthy subject of some time and discussion. Dave and Don, you want to take it away on the hydrology that we're facing here?
I sure would. Good afternoon, directors, board. Hopefully my technology is going to work for me here.
Dave, you just shared your Zoom screen, so we're looking at a picture of all of us.
There we go.
Perfect.
As I said, trying to keep up with all the tabs and screens and all the data, and the data is not good. You have in front of you, I believe, my memo. It was written at the end of December, and I was very hopeful that things may have changed by then. We had some good forecast, which did not pan out. And in fact, things have gotten worse. I've updated a few graphics here. I'll go through them quickly, but the memo should really be your guide. Starting with sort of the good news on your screen. Again, hopefully you can see the snow-tail plots that hopefully are very familiar to you all. But essentially the traces down here, if you can see my mouse, in the upper Colorado, this is the best area that we have. We're tracking right around median or a little less, but we're right around 2018. If you remember 2018,
Oh, yeah.
pretty dry year. As we move to some of the other basins, in particular as we go south, Blue Mesa is just a hair above 2018, and we're approaching 2002, which is another one of those dry years that we all, as hydrologists, want to forget, but we can't. And so moving again down basin to Lake Powell, the forecast is not good. We're looking at around 55% for the water year projected inflow to Lake Powell. Right now, inflows across the basin, top to bottom, are well below average. And in fact, we're setting records for what is in the streams today. The numbers and the statistics are startling, and I'm just going to try to read a few of these. In your memo, it talks about the 6-month period between April to December 2020, the driest period on record. As we move through some of these months, September 2020, second driest on record. October, driest on record. December, driest on record. So these are the flows that we're seeing and observing, the depleted flows going into Lake Powell. And so right now, again, we are tracking to be one of the 4 or 5 driest years for inflow to Lake Powell. And as you can predict, coming off a dry year of 2020, reservoirs are not in a good shape. This plot of Blue Mesa shows that we're quite dry, and we will not be filling the 24-month study, which is Reclamation's planning study. Obviously, they do this monthly, looking out the next 2 years. Does not show some of the large federal CRSP facilities filling. Blue Mesa should be at this point, or could be at this point, about 20 feet short of filling as we go forward. Again, graphically, I think these pictures show and tell the story. Incredibly low. Please ignore the title here. This is not correct. We are down in this brown minimum to 10 percentile region at Lake Powell, and we don't foresee much of a recovery this year. Lake Mead, even worse. And I should point out that also Reclamation 4 times a year does what they call their minimum, maximum probable model runs. And they are predicated on some very dry, startling dry soil moisture. We all know that there's really 2 parts of the water balance, our snowpack and our antecedent or preceding conditions. Preceding conditions are extremely poor from 2020. These red areas show that there's a significant soil moisture deficit. So even if we were to get a good spring, we would not be able to recover because a lot of that moisture will go into the ground and not run off. Nothing new for you all who live and breathe this every day. But I do want to just go a little further on the depressing side. The forecast that these models are run daily. I'm not going to get into great detail, but you can see we're at about 53% of average for April through July. You plug that into this 24-month study. Again, the min, max, probable. That's what these curves are. Here we are, sort of today, this bold line going forward, again at Lake Powell, end of month, we can see this envelope of probabilities. The minimum probable looking forward in the next 24 months shows that we are possibly going to go through what we, the River District, have been studying under the risk study, 3525, which is sort of our power pool protection level, we would call it. As early as the spring of 2022, we could go below that and be within about 30 feet of minimum power, 35 feet of minimum power. So quite startling results. Again, that's the minimum probable. There could be, again, statistically 10% of the years it could be worse than that. And on the bright side, we're just kind of keeping stable, right? With a good snowpack. As you look down Basin to Lake Mead, it gets worse and more troublesome to folks in Arizona in particular, who are on the hook for what they call tier 1 shortages. The memo talks about this, about 600,000 acre feet would not be delivered to the central Arizona region under tier 1 shortage, which is in the 2007 guidelines, which govern these operations, and which of course we are going to be looking at renegotiating. So that's really what I wanted to bring your attention to. I don't have any good news on the forecast. The 3-month outlook is tilting towards dry and warm. Fortunately, next week or so, we could get a pulse of moisture, hoping that's going to set the stage for some additional favorable flows. The drought monitor is essentially unchanged from what you see on figure 4 of your memo. Almost the entire state of Utah is in one of the exceptional drought categories. And the other thing that we're watching quite intently is the Sierras in Northern California. And the good news is California has some reasonable supplies, but they could be, they're entitled to actually withdraw additional water that they have put into Lake Mead under the interim, the intentionally created surplus criteria. I understand that they're not going to do that, but if conditions worsen and degrade in Northern California, the demand on Lake Mead could be worse than what's shown here in this plot. Coming back home, and maybe Don can weigh in a little bit, he sent me some stats to also brighten your day. Sorry for the sarcasm. Wolford Mountain, the forecast is about 57% of average. It's one of the drier parts of the upper Colorado, surprisingly, especially coming off last year, which was surprisingly good. And then Green Mountain, which is our workhorse reservoir, we look at very carefully in the upper Colorado. Those inflows right now are about half of what they should be, and the forecast is about 69%. And the reason that that's also something we need to look at is it could portend what we call a substitution year. It's way too early to panic, but the draw on Wolford, if necessary, could be greater if Green Mountain doesn't fill. So I can leave it there and maybe ask Don if he's got anything to add, or certainly if there's any questions, happy to talk to you all.
Okay, DK, if you can pull your thing down, it's a little easier for me to see if there are questions. Great. Who's got questions for DK? DK, I think it's so depressing, nobody really wants to know more. Director Vandenbrink.
Okay, sorry, I've got to double mute myself here from errors in the past. So Is there any way, I know soil moisture, as you mentioned, is a big chunk of this as well. As we move forward and as we're looking at kind of our water forecast picture, is there any way for us to incorporate any sort of soil moisture deficiency number to this, or is that too far out in the weeds?
Well, I'm not sure I'm totally following you, Director, but I believe what you're talking about is figure 2 in the memo. These soil moisture deficits are established in the fall. It's very hard for the hydrology in the winter to refill those. So the way the models work anyway, and this is really a model product, builds that in, and there's no way that I know of that we can sort of proactively fill the soil moisture deficit. So, obviously we are cloud seeding. You'll hear a little bit later in a subsequent agenda item. That's really where we're focused. Obviously irrigators, especially in some of the headwater areas, if they have access to flowing water, it's not iced up, they could utilize ditches, spread water, and in fact, Upper Gunnison, that's a typical practice. But that's really, if I'm understanding your question, the only way to attack that issue.
There,
Did that
see, I was
answer your-
talking and I had it on mute. No, I guess what I'm going at, Dave, is to quantify the shortages in our soil moisture so that we can add it, because there's a reservoir there as well. And we know what we have shortages on the ground physically, but what sort of shortages are we looking at subterraneally within our soil moisture content?
Right, so the soil moisture deficit is in the range of 18 to 24 inches. Very rough numbers. That's the category
That's fine.
that these polygons are. So you have to fill that first before runoff can occur. And as one of our colleagues pointed out, I mean, that's almost the consumptive use of a full crop. So we have to fill that up first before we can even have the ability to consume that groundwater for the root zone.
Okay, other questions or comments? Yes, Director Curry.
Thank you. I appreciate it. DK, you mentioned Blue Mesa levels being potentially 20 feet down at maximum storage. Can we still meet those target flows at Whitewater with that kind of a storage volume?
Right, that's a good question. And the way it works in the Gunnison, at least in most reservoir facilities, they have, drought rules. And depending on where we're at, and we did operate this way in 2020, where they actually decrease the target flows. So it's proportional and commensurate to what's in storage and what the forecast is. So essentially, we will see lower targets, but because of the record of decision, we will be trying, or reclamation, I should say, will be doing their best to meet those diminished targets. But those are definitely driving some of the operations. But again, fortunately, we had anticipated and allowed for these drier drought conditions, so we don't have the high peaks. We're probably looking at probably 5 to 8,000 CFS above Grand Junction that we would target for probably one day if things stay as they are, and maybe even below that. And the Black Canyon Federal Reserve water right probably will not do much to change those operations.
Thank you.
Other questions, concerns, comments? All righty. Thank you, DK.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. Moving on to the next item, I'll just say under C8C, we've actually already covered the River District Demand Management Stakeholder Advisory Committee, provided that. With respect to the Water Bank Workgroup update, as mentioned in your memo, we completed that secondary economic impact study, and the partnership there has decided to take a break for at least 6 months while we work on and look at whether or not there are additional items for that particular group to work on. I will just say that the partnership there with Southwestern and Tri-State and our Upper Gunnison and the Uncompahgre Valley water users and the Gunnison Valley, or excuse me, Grand Valley Water Users Association has really been valuable. And I feel like that group has produced a significant body of work over the last 10 years. But there's got to make sure that we're careful with our resources and not wasting folks' time and money to keep something going forward if there's nothing at this point to work on. So that group is holding steady in a kind of in a holding pattern, but certainly willing and able to do work if this board or others think that there's a reason to do that. Moving to the next, the East Troublesome fire recovery effort. I will just say this was something Mike Eitel was going to present. Unfortunately, Mike is ill today. And so I'm going to cover that. I think everybody's aware the East Troublesome fire erupted this summer in Grand County, and it was the state's second largest fire ever. Really extremely destructive fire in Grand County, a tremendous loss of structures and habitat, and damage to a number of watersheds up there. There is a concerted effort being led by Grand County and Northern Water Conservancy District, whose collection area around their Three Lakes system was damaged significantly by this fire, to engage in a pretty aggressive rehabilitation effort. They are working with funds from the National Natural Resource Conservation Service, the NRCS, through something they call the Emergency Watershed Protection Program, the EWP. Those same funds are being applied on the Grizzly Fire here in Glenwood Springs and the Pinion Gulch Fire, as well as the Cameron Peak Fire. So those are all major fires that happened this summer. In Grand County, they did ask staff what role we could play, and we're hoping that we would be willing to be a sponsor of a significant amount of the work that was going to be done in the East Troublesome area. I will tell you that unless you direct us differently, I felt that was unfortunately not the type of work or effort we could engage in with Grand County. I think there are things we can do, and I'll get to that in a minute, but being a sponsor of the EWP program involves quite a bit of staff, I should say non-reimbursable staff time in terms of lawyering and contracting and oversight on projects. It also involves multi-year obligations to make sure that infrastructure that's installed in those programs stays in place. Additionally, a lot of the work, but not all of it, when you talk about watershed protection programs like that, sometimes they are significant efforts to protect large residential structures and other things that probably don't fit squarely with, well, I can tell you, don't fit squarely within the mission of the River District as it's been defined by this board and our statute. On the other hand, Grand County has said, well, we'd love for you to sit on an advisory committee, an executive committee, you being the River District staff, and help us figure out how best to utilize these EWP funds. We think that's something we could do. We'd need to enter into a memorandum of agreement with Northern on that, Northern and Grand County and the NRCS. We think that's appropriate. We also think that it would be appropriate for water users and perhaps the county to look at our 7A funds for watershed protection and protection of agricultural and agricultural production, as well as infrastructure issues. For instance, the town of Hot Sulphur Springs gets its entire water supply out of the main stem of the Colorado. In the reach of the river that is most likely to be damaged by ash and debris flows, they're going to need some help redesigning their intake system and settlement basins and things, similar to the way that, frankly, Glenwood Springs is doing right now as a result of the Grizzly Fire. there's clearly a lot of suffering and work to be done up there in Grand County, and we definitely support those efforts. It's just a question as to what the best role for our staff is in that situation and our resources. And so essentially, we are recommending that the board authorize me as general manager, subject to review and approval by Peter as general counsel, to enter into a memorandum of understanding regarding the East Troublesome Fire Collaborative Restoration Project. And again, what we see ourselves in the role of helping providing expertise in terms of how to best apply those funds. Frankly, our staff will be able, hopefully, to direct some of the likely applicants towards our program to help them out when they're ready to and in need of local matching money to get some of that NRCS money on the ground and protecting their watershed. Questions, concerns with our recommendation? I see Director Richard's turned off his microphone. It probably would be appropriate to hear from the Grand County representative.
Andy, thank you. I think you summed it up very well. I did find out that I believe Grand County did get a FEMA designation on this fire and stuff, which will help tremendously, especially through the Grand Lake area, the Three Lakes area and stuff like that, which is where the greatest damage is caused. I agree with you that the MOU would be the proper way to go and the proper use of staff and the time of the River District. The additional funding and stuff. This year with the dry weather, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of irrigation and structures and things like that, and runoff. With the fire and some of the ground troubles that it caused in certain areas, that's going to be an interesting thing. It may be 2 to 3 years before we have a full understanding of what may happen to those type of structures. From the municipal side of it, I think there is concerns, especially with the hot sulfur area and their water collection system, but we could also potentially see that Granby might also have a problem with that a little bit on theirs too.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Good explanation of both of those. There is an action item here for authorization for the general manager to enter into an MOU. Is there a motion to put on the floor for discussion?
So moved.
Okay. Motion
Second.
by Director Richard, second by Director Catlin. Okay, now is there additional discussion on the MOU or the direction proposed by staff? Director Van den Brink to, okay. All right, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. And hopefully we'll be of some assistance up there in Grand County. The next item on our agenda is the approval of a cloud seeding funding request. We're going to bring back Deputy Chief Engineer Dave Kanzer, and Dave, will turn over to you again.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I mentioned a little bit, obviously, one of our only techniques to increasing or augmenting water supplies is through cloud seeding. We've had sort of, I'm sorry about the pun, but the perfect storm that caused our funding to be adversely impacted in a time when we really can't afford it. Another bad pun. But in any case, because of COVID, we've had some partners, some ski area partners, pull out of cloud seeding entirely. Some of the longest serving sponsors, Vail Resorts, essentially pulled out about $300,000 of support for those activities. That put us a little bit in a bind when we're trying to recover. What in sort of a scramble mode, look to our other partners, and without going into too much detail, patched together proposed about $100,000 of stopgap funding. And that comes from a matching sort of fund from the Front Range Water Council. Front Range Water Council, as you know, is an amalgamation of water providers, trans-basin diverters. They are already partners in our Central Colorado program. They said, hey, if you can come up with additional funds, we'll match it dollar for dollar. So that's kind of what brought us to this request to double the River District's contribution from 25,000, which we have been doing on an annual basis, to 50,000 for this 2021 operating year only. In addition, we were able to bring in some Eagle River partners. They're willing to step forward with about $30,000 of financial support. And what this does, of course, is allows us to continue seeding. Absent these funds, we would probably have to cease seeding sometime in spring. Right now, it has not been a great year. I'll give you just a little bit of background before we move to a motion or questions. We've had about 10 storms that are seedable, and we've expended about a third of our available funding. And again, the available funding comes from the Front Range Water Council, the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and the 25,000. So right now we have a budget and a contract with our vendor for about $200,000 to support this. Again, we're hoping to, through your action today, if you see fit, and our partners, be able to boost it up by another 100,000. So I guess I can leave it there. Most of this is all outlined, of course, in the memo. If you have questions, I'd be happy to discuss that with you now.
Okay, does anyone have question for, yes, Director Alvey?
Yeah, DK, does this program get funding from the lower basin, or is that other cloud seeding?
Yeah, thank you. So the way it works, the lower basin is very much a financial partner. Those monies are passed through the Colorado Water Conservation Board. So when I mentioned that, that's their funds. And what the CWCB does is, and DNR, they match also basically dollar for dollar. So I believe the numbers for this year for our program, 50,000 from the lower basin, more or less, 50,000 from CWCB. They gave us 100,000, 125,000 to be exact, and that rolls in. And so the CWCB is doing this not only for the Central Mountains, but they supply funding assistance to the Grand Mesa program, which benefits you on your properties there, as well as all the way down to the San Juans. So they are a big player, the lower basin. We did reach out to them for additional stopgap funding. They were not able to provide it this year, but they're very well aware of these challenges that we're facing.
Other questions or comments for DK? And otherwise, we have an action item requested to approve the Director Aquafresca.
I would offer a motion that the River District increase funding support for the 2020-21 cloud seeding year up to a total of $50,000.
Thank you. Second by Alvey. So it's been moved and seconded to approve staff recommendation. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And next item is also covered by Deputy Chief Engineer Dave Kanzer, who wears many hats here at the River District. Dave, if you want to go ahead and talk about the joint funding agreement with USGS, keeping in mind that, one of our new directors had a conflicting meeting that had been set before she was appointed, so she's currently not on, but will be back. I know Director Curry is here. It might not hurt to give a quick thumbnail sketch of what it is we do with the USGS, just for our new director's benefit.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And this is one of my favorite programs, and it's also one of the most expensive programs that the River District has under our general funds. We have a long-standing relationship with the USGS. They have what they call the Cooperative Water Program, which monitors quality and quantity throughout our 15 county region. We've been spending somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000 in recent years, and this year is no different. In fact, we may go up a little bit more based on today's discussion and tomorrow's discussion to support post-fire wildfire monitoring. But essentially, this request is our annual request. We have a whole host of these key monitoring gauges throughout the basin that, again, provide real-time, continuous data. These are all served up on the websites, which show the flow. So if you're looking at any of the stations, say below the Aspinall unit, that's the USGS. That's what they're operating and maintaining. And of course, it's a pretty pricey proposition. In addition, at a lot of those sites, we're collecting discrete water quality samples for a host of different parameters or water quality constituents, depending on what we're after. And so we've developed through this program a really robust data set, baseline information, and we're able to draw very good scientifically based conclusions on how things are changing or not changing. And the other really cool thing about this, and one of the things I really like, is we are working with entities throughout the basin. So, you know, watershed groups, conservancy districts, and they are also directing some activities, and we leverage their efforts and they leverage ours. So in other words, they're paying for a good portion of what they're interested in, and then then the River District and staff and USGS will say, well, if we go here and we add some value, add some sampling, we can add some value, right? So that's really the basis of this program. Eagle County is as an example, a very active participant. And in fact, they're one of our larger partners, shall we say. And we pass through some of their funds, and it helps defray our costs in this program. So in gross numbers, you know, we are looking at an obligation of about $600,000 for these activities, and we're offsetting some of that by about 110,000. So really the net expenditure, as you'll see in the memo here, is about 490,000. And again, that's a sizable chunk of change. And in the past, we have had USGS folks come in and provide presentations. They stand ready to do that. And I can also, at a future time, if there's desire, go through some of these sites and some of our findings. I'll just say a few more things about, you know, some of our activities and the importance of it. From a water quality point of view, we're able to quantify decreasing trends in salinity and selenium. And if you have known me for any period of time, you know that I spend a lot of time on those two topics. It's very gratifying to show that, or to know that the data very robustly shows this declining trend between 30 and 50% yield or load, we call it, and concentrations in the Gunnison subbasin. So that's just a real important thing. Other parts of the basin, we're looking at other constituents, not just salt and selenium, algae issues in the whites, temperature issues throughout. And so really important. I won't go on too much more, except I want to bring your attention to the last piece of this before we ask for some motions, is a potential work plan. Following up on your last discussion on the East Troublesome, I've been working with the Middle Colorado Watershed Council here in the city of Glenwood Springs, looking at what are the potential impacts of the fires, in this case, the Grizzly Creek fire. Same issues, direct diverters can be, and direct users here, River District personnel are drinking this water, what's in it, and what can we do to mitigate potential adverse impacts? So we don't have this yet, except that there is a proposal. This is a little off topic, but I just wanted to let you know, we're working with USGS to put together a one-year study. It could cost up to about $200,000 for a series of new sites. It's going to be hopefully offset by a grant from the Water Quality Control Division. And tomorrow, if and when and as you see fit to put together our partnership funding program, that might be a very good funding source, as you just heard. So just wanted to kind of throw all that together and let you know that we are trying to be responsive and utilize and leverage the data that we have in this collection program. So I'll pause there.
Sorry.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for DK on the USGS program? If not, the action item is to approve a total obligation by the district for the program of up to $600,000, with the concept, as I understand it, that we may have agreements with funding partners we would authorize the general manager to enter into, so that we might be reimbursed as much as $110,000, which would leave the district's actual out-of-pocket outlay at, I believe, $490,000. Did I get that recommendation correct?
You did, if you could just, if someone were inclined to make such a motion, that it would just move to move the staff recommendation for approval. And so we get the wording. I know Dave and others worked hard to make sure we worded that correctly.
No problem.
the
I just
staff
wanted to make sure
recommendation.
we understood what the action item is. Director
I move the
Merritt.
staff recommendation. DK is always good at dialing for dollars.
All right. It's
I
been moved.
will
Is there a
second that and confirm Eagle County's continued participation.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Staff recommendation be approved. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate it. Next, we're going to bring our Chief of Operations, Audrey Turner, up to talk about some approval of proposed employee and procedural guidelines. Audrey?
Thank you. I'll try to be respectful of your time. I know we are a few minutes behind. So every year we go through and look through our existing employment guidelines to see if there's any updates. And we have a few revisions for your review and approval. First up, we are recommending that we modify the matching funds that the River District has for the 457 and retirement health savings plan, to modify those, instead of being made over 6 months, that they be made equally over 12 months, so that it's consistent with the employee service for the year. That also would apply to the HSA, or the health savings account contribution, that the River District is making in 2021. So that was a change from, that was actually made in 2 installments in January and July. And so we're just would like to change that to be consistent with the other matching as over 12 months. The next, I know we talk about the RHS plan, or we have been talking about it quite a bit over the last year. We are proposing another modification to just sort of simplify the contributions. And we previously had 4 tiers that were split by age, and we had the contributions divided up over those 4 age tiers. And we're proposing that it just be changed to 2, under 49 category and a 50 and older. We did talk with staff several times over the last year to try to come up with what works best for staff and what their desires are. So we do believe that this is consistent with the desires of staff. The next one is a change to the accrual of the PPL and floating holidays. So previously they were accrued all 4 PPL and all floating holidays, depending on the year, on December 15th of the payroll year. And we're proposing that those be accrued on a quarterly basis. The last is the vacations. We have some language in there where it previously required employees to work 6 months before they were eligible to have vacation or have the vacation that they had been accrued. And we would just propose to eliminate that. And, you know, the River District, we value work-life balance, and we believe that employees should be able to use the vacation as they accrue it. So those are the revisions. I did include the red line pages for your review. Happy to address any questions you may have.
Anyone have question for Audrey? If not, is there a motion for staff recommendation?
I move the staff recommendation, Merritt.
Okay, is there a second? Catlin?
Second.
Oh, Richard.
Second, Gray.
Second, Gray. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Additional discussion? All right, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Audrey, and thank you, board. Our next,
Andy, you managed to mute yourself.
sorry about that. Our next item, I want to just say thank you to Audrey and the board for that. Our next item is the appointment of the Kobe Water Authority Board member from Garfield County, but I would just ask that this board hold off to see if Garfield County chooses to appoint a different representative to our board, at which point it would probably be appropriate to take up that issue. I do detail some.
They should be able to find a good member.
It may be Dave, you never know what so.
Okay, so we'll table that item till the
Yeah.
next meeting, the April meeting.
Perfect. And I would just encourage the board to read that portion of the memo to understand what the Kobe Water Authority is and where the course of that is going right now, because it is in transition.
Perfect. On your
Next item.
Yeah, the next item's goals and objectives, and I'm going to suggest that we do with your goals and objectives what we did with Peter's. Presumably everyone's had an opportunity to review those in the packet. So I think the appropriate discussion would, rather than go through each one of them, please, anyone who would like to raise a question about them, a concern, an addition, or a subtraction, let's have that conversation. Anybody want to raise their hand? Not really seeing a lot of concern or issues to add or subtract to your goals and objectives.
Okay, well, thank you. And certainly feel free to talk to me outside of this meeting if you have suggestions on that. Thank you. The next item that we added to the agenda at the beginning of the meeting is confirmation of appointment of David Kanzer to the Gunnison Basin Roundtable. That position, our River District representative voting member was held by Bill Trampy for quite some time. And our Gunnison Basin directors today are all either on the Gunnison Basin Roundtable or would prefer not to be because perhaps they're a legislator and might be too busy. And so we would recommend that the board confirm my appointment of Dave Kanzer to the Gunnison Basin Roundtable as our voting representative.
So moved.
Motion by Alfie, second by Chandler Henry. Or was that you, Curry?
Curry.
Curry, sorry. Sorry. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Okay.
All right, congratulations, DK.
Thank you
You're
so
now an
much.
official member.
Next item that was added to the agenda is a staff request that the board authorize board president to execute a letter retaining the auditors from McMahon and Associates LLC for the provision of audit and consulting services for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020. I apologize for this not being in your packet. That's my oversight. Our chief accountant, Ian Phillips, had worked with them to get that information prior to the packet being assembled, and it just slipped through my email inbox. So it does represent a $320 increase in cost over last year's audit. That audit cost the district $20,700. Or excuse me, the total this year is $20,700. So it was $320 less than that last year. They did a good job. They worked well with our staff. And frankly, we put this out to bid 2 years ago, I guess, maybe it was a year ago, and found these folks to be our best value. They're locally based within the district, and found them very easy to work with. So we recommend that authorization.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, I think that's Merritt with the motion. Who's seconded?
Second, Richard.
Thank you. All right, moved and seconded to approve the auditor for the 2020 audit. If there's no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. All right, thank you. We've hired the auditor for 2020.
Excellent. Well, the next item, and by the way, just real quickly on the audit, obviously, I think everybody on the board understands, but the auditor works for you. Staff provides them information, but it's really an important and essential tool for any government to make sure that funds are being handled appropriately. We're very careful to make sure that they have direct communication with your executives, the president, vice president. If you know, it is important to me as well as others on staff that you maintain that relationship with them and make sure that we're doing everything we can to maintain the financial integrity of the district and the taxpayers' funds. So thank you for doing that. I realize it's an expense, but it's definitely worth it from our perspective. So the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the Colorado River Water Conservation District's Partnership Project Funding Program Framework. That's quite a mouthful. You'll note that in that framework, I presented a red line version and a clean version of the document. I think that it is something that hopefully works for the board. I did try my best to listen. I do think that one of the items that Director Aquafresca brought up in amending the minutes from December 3rd, I wasn't able to work in there, and it's not because I didn't hear that recommendation. If you recall, what Director Aquafresca recommended was that we find a way to put money aside into a separate account to build up a reserve to be able to fund large projects. And I will say that I absolutely agree with Director Aquafresca that we should be able to and will hopefully fund significant projects with our funds. What I would say is that almost every one of those large projects is a multi-year project in which this district will have opportunities to provide funding in multiple years. And I did add a category to the analysis or to the framework under the additional factors to be evaluated at section 7 I, and I believe it's factors to be considered include size, complexity, and importance of a project, which may warrant consideration of multiple sequential funding awards. You know, the accounting, I just honestly struggled with how we could determine which amount to set aside into a reserve, and how then you determine what a large project is. I think that there's quite a bit of work that would go into figuring all of that out. I'm happy to do that if that is in fact the direction of the board to come back and modify this framework to incorporate that. What I would ask, however, is perhaps that the board consider approving the framework as written, give me some direction with respect to that reserve account if you want it, large project reserve account, and maybe maybe articulate your ideas into how that would work and what the parameters might be, so I could bring that back into the board for additional consideration in April. Maybe I'm lacking in creativity and just couldn't figure out how to quite get that together in the way that I think Director Acquafresca was hoping to see it. So.
All right. Who wants to? Yes, Director Acquafresca, you may start the discussion.
Thank you. Well, I understand one of the challenges of having a provision like this is the fact that the River District can only commit funds on an annual basis, on a year-by-year basis. And actually, I think that's a pretty good limitation. And I would certainly not suggest that such a fund be established until there's a project that would warrant it. However, such a fund is probably manageable in the event that we have a project that has widespread support and a very high price tag, and a given amount of dollars at that point could be set aside just every year, 1 year at a time, because we're limited to that. So I would support Andy's suggestion that he continue to look at that and try to craft the appropriate language in the event that such a project would present itself in the future.
Okay. Who else would like to talk about this? It was a very well written, I thought, Andy, both the memo and the actual document, I thought were very, very well written. So other comments or concerns, or we can entertain a motion. Director Curry.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate it. I just had a quick question, Andy, and I don't know if you can scroll down through the document, but on page 4,
maybe you could share the screen, Andy, that way we could all look at it.
Let's just, page 4, you said?
Yep, I was looking at page 4, item C, 2C, which has to do with geographic equity. And I just was looking for clarification regarding what you meant, or what is meant by the relative population of counties and basins and the relative financial contribution. What was the thinking there in terms of evaluating geographic equity?
Sure. I would suggest, Director Curry, in terms of geographic equity, I think that term could be interpreted in a number of different ways. For instance, if it's an equal dollar for every one interpretation would be, money must be spent dollar for dollar equally in each county. And I think in this particular circumstance with the River District that poses challenges in a couple of different ways. One, we have vastly different contributions in terms of economic contributions into the district between our counties. We also have geographic areas within the district that are greatly impacted by transbasin diversions, or maybe have particular threats to them based upon their geographic location. It could be whether it's the headwaters where their threats are again TMDs, or whether it's our border counties along our rivers that may be threatened by out-of-state investors who might try to buy the water up and find creative ways to send that water downstream without appropriate sideboards on them. And so the question is, how do we best split that money and those efforts in the funding? And I think that because I don't think it can be black and white. I think that the board and staff need to consider all of those relevant factors. And really it's, you know, the running average distribution of funds, the relative population. So, you know, I think it is clear, although I originally hailed when I started working in this district as a director from the Gunnison Basin, what is apparent if you study our finances is that the vast majority of our monetary contributions to the district, as well as the majority of the population in our district, resides within the main stem of the Colorado. And so additionally, the main stem of the Colorado happens to have a majority of the, if not all, almost all of the transbasin diversions active in that main stem. And rather than set some official formula for that, I think it's something that I think our board and our staff needs to consider what that relative financial contribution and the population is, the number of requests of funding from certain counties or drainages, and the relationship for any request to a strategic goal of the district. Again, those are factors. I can tell you that during our small grant program, when we used to have it, there were certain counties that had very active NRCS offices that understood how to game our system. And I shouldn't say game. They understood the benefits of our grant program tremendously well. And Mr. Alvey is smiling over there in Delta County, because I think the vast majority of our funds went to Delta County, and not because they did anything wrong in Delta County, but because they knew how to apply for the money. I think we have to consider all those factors as a board when we're distributing these funds as the program rolls out. And I think it's hard. I think that my guess is that there are lots of opinions about exactly how that share should be contributed, but I think we need to recognize that there isn't just one factor that determines that. And President Whitmore may not appreciate my picking on my former home county, but let's look at Uray County as an example. If they don't contribute 1/15 of our revenue, and so in any given year, do we have to give them exactly 1/15, or over 5 years, do we have to give them 1/15 of the revenue? Probably not, but there may be a project that we would want to one year give them greatly more than that, because there may be a really worthwhile project that we would contribute additional funds to. Same thing with Gunnison County or frankly, even Picken County. I think our representative from Picken County might say, well, we contribute more funds than anybody else, so we should instantly get all of our money back and maybe some additional funds, right? So we have to find that balance that works for all directors. And if I can successfully piss all of you off right now while I talk about this, then maybe I won't have to worry about how you distribute the funds. But I want to point out how many factors have to go into that decision. And that's why I referenced all those items. I think it will be, for this board and for future boards, a really ongoing discussion as to how we distribute those funds in an equitable manner. But I do want to say, I just don't think it's going to be by population or by dollar contribution or by size. There are all these different factors that play into it. So that would be my suggestion.
But Andy, just to clarify, the proposal and the document as proposed does not contain any kind of formula. At the end of the day, it's going to be a site-specific, request-specific, project-specific review and consideration by the board, and a determination on an annual basis. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think that we do encourage that it's an equitable distribution among counties as we represented in our fiscal implementation plan. And so what equity is, kind of going back to that demand management definition of equity, what does it mean? Well, it means people have an equal opportunity to try to get the funds from the program. We have to make sure that this board really does its best to distribute those funds in a way that makes sense for our constituents, and importantly meets our strategic goals. So there may be times where one county may have a tiny population, but may receive a tremendous amount of funds because of the strategic goals of the district.
Director Chandler Henry.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak in favor of having that clear intent of equitable distribution over time. I think that provides the accountability that anyone in the public or any of the directors can look at the projects, look at the funding, see how that plays out over time. And I think the factors that you outlined, Andy, really give a good picture of how that might look as we look at specific projects. And I'm thinking of things like the Grand County Water Project, which clearly benefited Eagle County because the river is shared right there at the county line. So there are things like that. And at the county level, when we look at things like open space funding or housing funding or any of those projects and look at the geography just within the county, especially Eagle County, it has to be that intent that it's equitable over time. Otherwise you end up with projects that aren't very good because you're trying to be exactly equitable on a timed basis. And I don't feel that works.
Director Alvey.
Yeah, I think that's the critical thing. We want good projects. And we don't want to get too tied into a formula where every year we're looking to see, oh, well, they're $50,000 ahead over there. And so we have to balance that out. I think Director Chandler Henry is correct. We need to look at it over time and give it time to work. We're going to make changes in this program as we go forward. We'll find out things that we should have thought of. But as an outline to guide us for now, I think this memo is very good. And I think, in my view, the geographical equity would primarily be an issue of basins. So that's just my personal attitude towards it. I think we need to spread the money amongst the basins more than specifically county to county. But in any case, I think what we've got here is a good direction, and let's not try to tie our hands too tightly to begin with.
Director Aquafresca.
Thank you. I just want to remind folks that the River District does not have to expend all of these dollars every year. Let's not feel that the money's burning a hole in our pockets. We'll make good decisions based on the criteria that we adopt. And if money rolls over into the next year or even the next year beyond that, so be it. That money will eventually be put to the best use. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Director Munger.
Yeah, so I'm very supportive. Andy, you did a good job here, and I think it's going to be our responsibility to periodically review that and put some input in as we learn by doing, kind of like COVID, as we learn by doing. It's problematic, what Director Aquafresca brought up is funding a long-term project or something, and as opposed to counties or municipalities who do certificates of participation and the rest. So I don't know how we deal with that, but I do think that we promised our voters that we were going to try to do some type of equitability, and I think this sets us in the right direction and how we can move forward with that. So I'm very supportive of it.
Okay. Would anyone like to present a motion to adopt the presented partnership project funding program framework document?
I'll offer that motion.
Director Aquafresca, thank you.
Munger, second.
Thank you, Director Munger. So it's been moved and seconded that we adopt the framework document that's in your packet as written, with the understanding that over time we will undoubtedly review and revise, but it will at least give us a place to start. Any other comments? All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Very agreeable board today. We're all in favor of everything. That motion passes as well.
Well, I greatly appreciate everybody's support and assistance on that. Really, the input you provided both in the last several years as we worked up towards 7A and the creation of that implementation plan, and then the creation of this document and your feedback in December really is valuable, and I appreciate everybody's assistance. I want to just say we are in the process of attempting to hire a partnership project. We have posted that job. The job advertisement closes tomorrow. And I can tell you that we have had an incredibly high level of interest from some really qualified candidates who have contacted me and other staff members, and many who've already applied. So I think it's amazing that when you operate a program that gives away money, what kind of talents you can attract. So it's a good thing. We're excited about that. Keep in mind as we hire this person, and that is a new position in the district. It is not an additional full-time equivalent. It is not an additional position. We're moving one of our former EA positions over into the engineering and tech division so that we keep our employment level at the same level, just as we promised our taxpayers we would. So we're kind of shifting our resources to handle the new workload. We're really excited about it. And I wanted to, today my goal was to bring an opportunity to you for at one or two projects that would show you how this framework would work. Make sure that you and I are on the same page so that when we bring in the new employee and work with our existing employees to analyze these projects, that I and the staff hear what you want to see and make sure we're doing it the right way. The one that we were able to bring that I think is really ripe is a project that I apologize. Boy, between Peter and I, we got you several late memos this time, so I apologize. I think mine came out on Sunday to you, and I hope I didn't interrupt anybody's Sunday afternoon football watching. And if I did, I'm glad that you weren't able to watch my hometown Cleveland Browns lose yet again. But I will say that what I'm recommending is that you consider authorizing our first project to fund the Windy Gap bypass, or as it's known, the Colorado River Connectivity Channel, with $1 million from the Project Partnership Funding Program. Further, and this is really important, is that it's that within our internal accounting, that the funds be attributed 1/2 each to the healthy rivers and then the watershed health and water quality. So $500,000 to each of those buckets or categories, if you will. This is a program that we've been involved in since its inception at a staff and board level. And I'm just going to walk you through real quick, if I can, a very quick slideshow prepared by the proponents of the project. And I just need to see if I can't figure out how to share my screen with you. Make sure I can do this. Here we go. All right. So the Colorado River Connectivity Channel is, if I can show you, up in Grand County on the main stem of the Colorado River. You'll note it is down below Grand Lake and Lake Granby, and the Windy Gap Reservoir was put in by the municipal sub-district Northern Water Conservancy District back in the mid-'80s. It was something that was put in after great debate and discussion and litigation with the Colorado River Water Conservation District. And it did go in. It was a main channel reservoir, which is extremely shallow. And what it effectively does there is it cuts off the Fraser River and the upper Colorado River from the parts of the river below it. And the parts of the river below it, down near Hot Sulphur Springs and Kremling, have suffered in terms of water quality, warmth, and just much lower macroinvertebrate habitat. This is going back to the inception of the River District. Grand County's interest in participating in the River District had to do with protecting its recreational fishing economy. It's really one of those really interesting facts that if you go back and read George Sibley's History of the River District, it's been a really important issue for Grand County since well before 1937 when we were formed. So that this channel, if I can first, the partners in this effort are the municipal subdistrict of Northern Colorado or Northern Water Conservancy District, Trout Unlimited, Grand County, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the NRCFs, the CWCB, us, and the Upper Colorado River Alliance. The project objectives include improving sediment transport, moderating stream temperatures, assisting with aquatic life and fish passage, reduction in stream bed monitoring below the reservoir, and not impacting the Windy Gap operation. That's a goal probably more importantly shared by Northern than by us. But if I can show you where that generally is, the current Windy Gap facility is here. It's again a very shallow reservoir, basically a pumping forebay for the Windy Gap pumping plant that pumps water up into the Colorado Big Thompson system. There was a dam. This orange line represents the existing dam. The intention is to reduce the volume of that reservoir significantly by constructing a new dam in the approximate location of the pink line with a bypass channel. That's a fairly rudimentary depiction of that bypass channel on this slide. This is a little bit better here in terms of what is in folks have in mind. Basically improving the aquatic habitat and shrinking the size of the Windy Gap reservoir. That in a nutshell is what it's doing. I think this is a depiction of the before and after. I would just say that this is a program that has a tremendous amount of support from the local community, both the agricultural community, the local county government. You'll notice their letter of support. I did include within the memo a fairly extensive analysis trying to just show you exactly how we would apply at the staff level. And let me say how I think we would apply the factors in the framework that you just approved. And the key for that is that I wanted to set an example for you, but also for staff to make sure that we're doing what you need to. That's really what this is about. I go into much greater detail in the memo. I do believe that this project aligns very closely with the mission of the River District and our strategic plan and our policies. I'm happy to talk about that more. I also think that when one looks at the benefits of this project, it is both a project that contributes to the healthy rivers and the watershed health and water quality of the area. Arguably, it also supports productive agriculture in that the irrigators downstream, those that are often referred to as irrigators in the vicinity of Kremling, are some of the most ardent supporters of this project because they believe it will bring colder, clearer, better water to their irrigation pumps and their crops. I think, however, because it doesn't directly bring water benefits and water supply benefits to those agricultural producers, I didn't feel that it was appropriate to attribute a portion of these funds to the productive ag component. Even though it may have secondary benefits for them, it's not their primary purpose of this project. I would point out that this project is part of a much larger landscape scale restoration effort in the Upper Colorado that is really being spearheaded by the local community in an effort to repair a river system that has been tremendously damaged by trans-mountain diversions. And that's really, when I look at our role in this as a river district, I think assisting our communities in mitigating the damage caused by trans-basin diversions. I believe that we have some critical mission responsibility there. I do contain within this memo the distribution, the beginning of our accounting on how we're going to account for these funds over time and in distribution, just so that you can see what I have in mind for that. I addressed the geographic equity. It was very simple in this one. There's no equity. It's all going to Greene County. We believe the other counties will catch up, right? So, but that you have to start somewhere. I think the other part of this that's really important to me is the leveraging of our funds. The timing of this board's commitment to fund this $1 million is important from my perspective, because it then gives me, and maybe it's that apple box that Mr. Catlin, Director Catlin was talking about, gives me a soapbox to stand on to help pressure the Department of Natural Resources and the Colorado Parks and Wildlife to provide habitat funds for this project. It allows me to pressure, frankly, Denver Water and Northern to provide additional funding. I've been in conversations since I took this job where there have been some awfully snide remarks about the lack of River District funding involvement in this project. This gives us grounds to push back extremely hard, which is some of the leverage I was looking for when we talked about this this whole concept of our 7A funding. There's very strong local community support, and there's very limited human resource requirements. I think one of the things I want to stress, a project like this where you're redesigning a dam on a reservoir and redesigning a stream channel carries with it some pretty significant liability and risk. The River District is not assuming any of that risk, and I think we'll rely on our legal counsel to make sure any of the documents we sign are very clear on that. We will provide funding to the project sponsors and the project operators. It is actually Northern Water Conservancy District that will, and their municipal sub-district, that will be constructing this project and having the liability for anything that goes wrong with respect to the construction of their dam or the construction of this stream system. So we're not, by contributing to this, we are not creating or assuming a role that would cause us ongoing liability. I evaluate all of the different factors in the memo that carry with what I believe you identified in our framework as appropriate risk assessments. I think our risk is very low on all of those. And with that, I'd recommend to the board that you have a lively discussion, that you tell me how I can better do this so that I can pass that along to our staff and our new project manager. But I would also ask that you approve this request so that we can get moving with our project funding element.
All right, thank you, Andy. First, let's take any questions or any concerns or questions of Andy about his memo or the project.
Marty, I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner or Director Winery, and then I see Director Munger as well.
Andy, I do have a couple of questions. I'd like to see them to a certain extent, try to reduce the cost of a $23 million project, whether it's value engineering or, by some other mechanisms. But my other real question is on these larger long-term projects that they're short the funding. And I think they're fairly close, if you really look at it, but if we chipped in and these other partners came up with some other money, I guess the question begs, let's just assume this is a $23 million project. It goes to bid, it comes back at 23 million or 25 million. they're still short. How long does this money actually, are we obligated that you tie up the funds to a certain, whether it's this project or any of the other ones? Because, you know, on the other boards that I've served on and other things, you can obligate the funds, and sometimes the project never moves. Your money's kind of sitting there, and it could have went to somewhere else. I guess that's a question I should have maybe asked earlier.
You know, Director Winery, that's an excellent question. I think it would be appropriate for our board to consider a time limit on any funding project, and whether that's 2 years or 5 years may depend on the scope of the project or the size of the project. I do think having a termination date on the availability of our funding makes sense. Many funding programs, as you point out, have that, and you're right. That's a deficiency in my recommended program. So I knew that we'd be revising the program, and see, we're going to do it already. So that I really appreciate that question. You know, in this particular instance, I would suggest at least a 2-year lifespan on this grant, probably longer given the scope of this project. But
I'm going to go to Director Richard because he may have an answer to the question, and then back to Director Monger.
Chairman Whitmore, thank you very much. I believe Melly Whiting's on, as well as Ed Moyer. Both of them are very connected to this project and would probably have answers to that if they would be allowed to speak on this. Andy.
Absolutely. And I would encourage Ed and yep, Melly, there you guys both are. So feel free to unmute yourselves, and
thank you.
Comments would be very welcome. Melly is with Drought Unlimited, and Ed is the current, correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, acting Grand County manager.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Melly Whiting, Drought Unlimited again. And Ed, I'll just say a couple of things and then pass it on to you. But I think that's a very accurate comment, that sometimes these projects just tend to go on and on and on, and putting a time frame makes a whole lot of sense. I just wanted to let you know that we already do have that time frame. A big chunk of the funding comes from the NRCS, and we have a deadline of September 30th, 2023 to get it done. So that deadline is there already. There is also, of course, the longer you wait, the higher the cost goes. So we do have an incentive to get it done. The other thing that is interesting about this project is that we're trying this process where you hire the general contractor before you're ready to build. And that the purpose for that is to have the general contractor look at the design that is being developed and say, okay, that makes sense. So you don't have the situation where you come back later on after the old design is done and you went to bid and all that, and you have the contractor say, well, I can't build this. So you really reduce both the risk, you also reduce the time frame, because with this contractor, if the second role of the contractor is to actually start putting together cost estimates as we go through 30% design, 40% design, 60% design, and so forth. So by the time we get to 100% design, which will happen, we're looking at summer of this year, we will have a guarantee from the contractor that that's what they're going to charge. So again, that reduces the risk and also keeps the time frame shorter than if you had to go through the entire design process and then you go through the construction process and go to bid and then dealing with a contractor. So I thought that may help answer some of those concerns, but I do agree that a time limit makes a lot of sense.
Mr. Moyer, did you have anything to add to that?
Thank you, Director. No, I would echo what Melly said. It's exactly that. Our time frame is tied to that NRCS, RCPP program, and it's 2023 currently. For Grand County, our open lands, rivers, and trails funding of $1 million we had some of the same comments as was previously stated. What is the window of that? Right now, that much of this money from our partners is quote committed. There's a budget within Mr. Mueller's handouts that depicts that. So it's that committed money for Grant County. That money is sitting, in our bank collecting interest, but we have that money committed to the project. So I would hope that it could do the same based on that timing from any approval from the directors. Thank you.
Okay, Director Monger, you were next in line with a question.
So I guess I follow up on Director Winery's comments. The sticker shock hurt a lot on the whole thing. So it's like, wow, gonna rebuild the valley. So I can't, but anyhow, I don't know that I had a question either. I guess the question would be, and back to Andy or something, is this like a 10-year commitment of 100,000 a year, or is it up front? Are we gonna, we kind of, and they would need to know that we're committed to the project. So we would have to actually earmark that money and set it aside right now. And I'm not so much opposed to it. And I realize where we're at with this thing. I'm surprised that the benefactors of this whole thing aren't, well, and they're going to be coming with a big portion of the money as well, Northern, but wow, it's pretty surprising. Thank you.
Well, Director Monger, I would agree with you that the price is surprising. I've certainly had conversations with both Mel and Ed about that. And I don't think any of the project proponents are excited about the expense associated with this. And they are looking for ways to reduce that expense. I would say that we would, I'm asking the board to commit this $1 million this year. I think having a termination date of that September 30th of 2023 as part of the board approval would be appropriate. And I think you could even add a statement in there that you would encourage the project proponents to continue to value engineer and reduce the cost of this project. But I think that having that approval for $1 million and then having it be expended within that time frame is really probably how we're going to have to deal with most of our projects as we approve them through this program.
Director Alvey.
Just a question for either Andy or perhaps for Melly. In the budget, I did not see a contribution from the sponsor Trout Unlimited. Did I misread the budget handout, or is there no contribution from TU? What's up as a sponsor?
Yeah, and that's a good question. Trout Unlimited, like many of these conservation organizations, don't necessarily have a big stash of money. What we do is that we go out there and fundraise to bring the money in. So that's what we did when we applied for the NRCS grant. That at the time that we applied for it was more than half of the cost of the project would have been covered by it. Not anymore. But that's kind of the sort of contributions that we have in an application to the CWCB and so forth. We are, however, and our Chris Wood, our president, is very much interested in this project, and working together with one of the landowners downstream. They're in contact with pretty high worth individuals out there. And they have committed to, Chris Wood has committed to go out there and try to raise funds from our private donors and foundations and so forth to try to bring additional funds. If that answers your question.
Okay, Peter, I'm going to ask you to perhaps discuss Tabor implications such that they might be for multi-year obligations. I assume you can obligate the money and put it aside. $1 million we could put aside this year, even if it's not spent until 2022 or 2023, as opposed to obligating $100,000 a year for the next 10 years. Thoughts on that?
That's how I would suggest that you do it. Obviously, assuming you got the $1 million to commit in the current year, and we would, I think, I'm not sure how the tax revenue's coming in yet, but I know under our projections, obviously, we anticipate we're going to get that. So yeah, you can commit that, and it's treated on the books as an expenditure or commitment, of an expense of revenue, and you socked away in an account until it gets utilized for that project. So that's probably how I would do it. If in the future there's a different project where that would benefit or require a commitment over a period of years, then I think that's trickier for sure. The standard way is to obviously you try not to do it first, but if you have to, you make it subject to annual appropriations. That it would be in your discretion as the board, and that's just the way you have to do it. Otherwise, there is a problem with the multi-year fiscal obligation.
Director Merritt.
Yes, I don't believe this project could be constructed as they're targeting for 100,000 a year for 10 years. The bulk of the loading will be late 2021 through 2022 into 2023. I mean, maybe $500,000 a year for 2 years, but this is a major construction project. If you're otherwise, you're looking at requiring some entity to take out a loan to pay that construction cost. So those costs get incurred each month and paid each month. So they would be looking at putting this money where they could draw on it for that construction reimbursement on a monthly basis.
Yes, Director Curry.
Thank you, President Whitmore. Maybe Andy could help me with this. What would be the fund balance estimate if this grant were awarded under the partnership program? I understand those revenues aren't all in the door, but is there an estimate on that?
Well, in terms of the annual estimate, we should have, historically, we receive all of our tax revenue usually by April or May of the year. So by April or May, before any of this money goes out the door, we'll have a pre-existing balance of 4.2 million in that fund. After this expenditure, that would be a $3.2 million remaining balance. But we anticipate, I can just say based on past performance, we've not had any significant issues with our tax revenue collection that would cause us to believe that this revenue is not going to be received in the first half of this year.
Additional comments, questions, or does anyone want to make a motion? Director Acquafresca.
Thank you. I've had the opportunity to learn a little bit about this project in some detail as I serve on the Colorado River Roundtable, and we've had considerable discussions about it. And folks from Grand County have come down to talk about it in great detail. As expensive as it is, I think it's a really necessary project. But what it points out to us, I find the project supportable, is what I'm saying. But what it points out to us is how terribly expensive it is to correct the sins of the past. And there's a lot of them out there in the water world that are going to have to be addressed. This is one of them, and it should be a lesson to everybody of our generation in the water community to really pay attention to what you're doing, because the need to move forward on this is an example that at one time in our state's history, they weren't paying attention to the unintended consequences. So I find the project supportable, and we are in a position to contribute to it. So thank you for listening.
Is that a motion, Director Aquafresca?
I wasn't prepared to make a motion.
All right, thank you. Additional questions, concerns, or anyone want to make a motion? Director Vandenbrink.
I have a question, and probably I missed it here. I don't know. Well, I didn't know we were having that we were going to be opening up the process already to accept applications for projects. I didn't know if we had to do public advertising for this. So, is this just a flagship project that we're really trying to promote here and move forward? Because I see the benefits, but the process is to where I see that there's maybe something that's not quite there that I'm not understanding. And I also see that this is yes, it is a Colorado River Basin project, but yet the ownership seems kind of skimpy on their contribution. I would expect more from them, since they're going to be a pretty significant beneficiary of this. And I like where we're going on how this project falls out, but there's pieces to this puzzle that just aren't adding up all the way, that maybe afterwards we got to have a talk with me about it, but I just seem to be missing something here.
Well, if I can, Director Van Brink, the program, we do not have I think the way this program was conceived and presented in the framework is that we have a rolling application deadline. So there's not one set point in time in any given year, or two points in time where someone has to submit their application by. That framework sets out a 6 week prior to our quarterly meeting, they would need to provide a full and complete application. I think what this, perhaps the reason this project is being brought up is for two reasons. One is really, I felt like we needed to have this discussion with something actual and concrete in front of us so that we could understand how this program would work, not theoretically, but actually. And so that we could see, I could hear from you concerns like those raised by Director Winery, which I think are excellent points that we need to incorporate into our program. I would also say that what is critical with these funds is that this is an opportunity for this district to drive our priorities, right? To be the not just the thought contributors to projects throughout the West Slope, but to actually provide that economic catalyst to bring in additional funds. The project proponents, let me just say this, include Grand County. Grand County has already chipped in $1 million from their Healthy Rivers Fund. They are about to consider chipping in another $1 million, so that will be a $2 million contribution. Northern Water, combined with its municipal sub-district, if I'm not mistaken, in their enterprise, have already contributed $5 million to the project, or committed $5 million. We expect them to contribute additional funds, and one of the calls and letters I'll be sending after this is to Brad Wynn to encourage him to put down additional funds because of our involvement. I think there are others. The Windy Gap project is not a Denver water project. It does not benefit Denver, but the Colorado River and the Fraser River are significantly impacted by the depletions caused by the Moffat Tunnel system up above the Windy Gap project. So we do hope, and I have reason to believe Denver Water, upon our contribution, will bring in additional money. So at least from my perspective, the local community, the project proponents have actually chipped in quite a bit of money and done fairly remarkable fundraising in terms of the additional funds from the CWCB and others. The local community, that Upper Colorado River Alliance of landowners and the anonymous donor, are also in local. Those are local community members who are contributing a little bit over $1.2 million to the project. So I want to stress that I actually think this is a good example of where the community, the local community and the project proponents clearly have skin in the game. They are clearly committed. We are bringing it in to help get them over the edge, but I think we can do it in a way that will leverage our contributions. As I said in the memo, $1 million is a lot of money from the River District. There's absolutely no way around that. It is only 1/23 of the cost of this project. And so we're not paying by any means all of the project, or even close to a majority of the project. And so, you know, I think what we're doing is contributing what we can and helping kind of on the political level push others to contribute. Parks and Wildlife, for instance, again, we'll intend to be talking with folks there to demonstrate our commitment and exert pressure that we're able to help them fund additional funding that Grand County and Trout Unlimited are pushing. So I think, at least in my mind, this is the type of funding partnership that I had in mind when we were putting together the partnership funding program, and that it really brings together all of these folks to fix something. That's really where I come from, and I think I utilize this project as the first, and I think you're right, a flagship may be the best term for it, because it is something that our district has been involved in and has been pushing for over 10 years. And it's not a new project to our board or staff. It is something that affects the very headwaters of the river, of the main stem of the Colorado. It's again been impacted by those trans-mountain diversions. That's such a priority over time. And I think this is a way that we can stand up and support that.
Thank you. I guess I want to make sure that I'm clear that I wasn't expressing the local participation like Grand County as much as the project owner. That's where I'm at. The benefit is really going to be felt, I know on the Colorado River Basin side, but ultimately there's going to be significant benefit as well to the northern water piece. There's not going to be a shortfall for them. And it's going to be a win for them as well. So that's where I see them. Yeah, $5 million. That's not what's exposed on the spreadsheet that I looked at. It had, I believe, $1 million in there. But you talked about the municipal piece, and those items weren't all added together. So, but I just would expect more input and participation from them. If it's a project of importance, then they would really want to be carrying that further as well.
Well, and I agree with you. I would say what this is at least what it started out as, was a forced piece of mitigation required by Grand County and some litigation that the River District was involved in to mitigate the impacts of the municipal subdistrict's construction of Windy Gap Reservoir. This is not going to financially directly benefit in terms of financial benefit to Northern or their municipal subdistrict, nor will it directly enhance or increase their water diversions to their benefit. It is part of the IGA that our district executed back in 2012 with Northern over their Windy Gap firming project. This was the study that created this bypass was all integrally related to that our board, your predecessor's agreement to participate and sign off on that Windy Gap firming project. This is one of those benefits from us. So the primary ecological and even economic benefits of this project on the ground are to the local community and to the folks downstream in terms of water quality. It has more to do with mitigating the damage that's been caused by Northern's up there, which is why they're contributing the $5 million. And I agree with you. It's a little hard in that spreadsheet to see Northern, but they're the second, third, and fourth line, which is the total of $5 million. Again, we have good reason to believe that they are going to be committing to contributing additional funds here fairly quickly.
Thank you for enlightening me.
Director Chandler-Henry.
Yes, thank you. I want to start by saying I support Director Vandenbrink's idea to use this as a way to push for some bigger funding commitments from those partners on on the eastern side of the water divide there. But I think that this is really an excellent project for our first foray into the partnership project funding. It's really visible. People in the River District know about it. They've known about it for a lot of years. There's huge local support. It's part of the whole big system. It is a headwaters county. It's a damage caused by transmountain diverters, and it's critically important for the Colorado River. So for all those reasons, I think that it is an excellent project. I think the dollar amount is doable. I don't see any reason to think we won't get the expected tax revenue, at least this year. Who knows in the future? So, Madam President, if you're ready for a motion, I would move to support this funding request at $1 million.
Okay, motion by Director Chandler Henry, second by?
Richard.
Perfect. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion on the request? Yes, Director Munger.
Yeah, just real quickly. So Director Vandenbrink brought up a great discussion. So after we have our motion or next meeting or what, we're going to have a further talk about the process, because we identified in the outline how, or, you know, what we're going to be looking for, but I don't know that we discussed the RFP kind of concept or some type of process that we're going to go through here. So I'm supportive of the motion. I just curious if we can have that further discussion.
Okay, we'll ask the general manager to put that on the agenda for further discussion in April. Okay, Director Richard.
Thank you. I do think these bigger projects like this, it does create a huge challenge. And I think the work that Melly and her organization, Trout Unlimited, and Ed through Grand County have done to get this to this point is rather incredible from my perspective. It took a lot of work on their behalf to bring all these organizations together, to put this funding together to get to here. The possible passage of this $1 million from the River District is only going to help, as Andy said earlier, hopefully leverage these funds to finish this project. And I think it's something that needs to be done, especially for the health of the river through Grand County and on down the main stream or main stem of Colorado through the state.
Other comments or discussion?
Madam President, let the record, I'm going to be abstaining on this vote. AECom is the engineer on this.
All righty, thank you, Director Merritt. All right, we will, unless there's additional comment, all those in favor of the motion? I'm sorry, Andy?
Excuse me, President, I just wanted to confirm that part of the motion was that these funds be expended and distributed on or before September 30th of 2023. And just to make sure that staff has this on record correctly. And so it's the staff recommendation together with that termination date on the fund.
Let me amend my motion to move for the staff recommendation.
Second.
And is that all right? Richard,
Yes,
Director
it is.
Richard?
It is.
All right.
Yes.
So with that, is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right. Again, thank you. The motion passes. And I think we are now on to committee appointments for 2021. Lori will be mailing these out, but let me just run through the list. Everybody should be on two committees, I believe. And so the executive committee, as you know, and was in the packet, is on a rotating basis. So for 2021, the executive committee includes me as president, Mark Catlin from Montrose, John Ely from Pitkin, Reby Hazard from Swatch, Mike Richard from Grand, and Al Vandenbrink from Rio Blanco. Litigation Committee will be chaired by Steve Aquafresca with Kathy Chandler Henry, Tom Alvey, Stan Winery, and John Ely. Information and Outreach will be Al Vandenbrink as chair with Mark Catlin, Reby Hazard, Taylor Hawes, whoever our representative from Garfield County ends up being. And the Investment Committee, Doug Munger will be the chair, Tom Gray, Taylor Hawes, John Ely, and our Garfield County representative will be on that committee. And then the Water Projects Enterprise Water Supply Projects Committee will be chaired by Tom Alvey with Tom Gray, Kathy Chandler Henry, Kathleen Curry, Doug Munger, Mike Richard, Steve Aquafresca on the committee. If anybody's dreadfully unhappy with your with where you got put, let me know. But otherwise, there you go. And with that, we have an opportunity now for public comment. To do public comment, because I'm not really seeing everybody, if you could just raise your hand. I believe that's still an option. And Andy and Audrey, maybe you can help see if there's anybody who was looking to make a comment.
Madam President, I don't see anybody with their hand raised to make a comment from the public.
Perfect.
I believe Melly Whiting has her hand up.
Oh,
Her
Melly.
physical hand, not her.
There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to thank the board very much for your decision today. It is a worthwhile project, and looking forward to coming back in a couple of years and show you really nice pictures. Better yet, take you up there and take a look at one thing that Andy didn't mention, but it's probably in the memo, is that this is going to be a public amenity. We've got about 2 miles at this point of the Colorado River that is going to be open to the public. So pretty exciting project, and really appreciative of your contribution. Thank you.
Same
Thank
here. I didn't want to interrupt before, but on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners and our project partners, thank you so much. And it is very, very appreciated. We will leverage that 1 million to get to the finish line, like Melly said. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your comments. Anybody else that, Andy or Audrey, do you see anybody else trying to get our attention?
I don't, but I didn't see Melly either. So, I'm not sure I'm at this.
I'm going to assume that we don't have anyone else. So the meeting is now continued until tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. when we will take up the rest of the General Counsel's report and the rest of the agenda. All right. Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
so
See you in
much.
the morning.
Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.